Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the April 18th meeting of the Conservation Commission. We're going to start tonight's agenda with other business, a discussion on the revisions to the T-Ticket Park Conservation Restriction by the 300 Committee.
One quick thing, Mr. Chairman. You all have a copy of the CR in front of you, and Ms. Erickson's going to just go over some of the revisions that were required, and they're all redlined out in front of you. The 300 Committee Board of Directors did this last Wednesday.
Yes. Okay,
And these are revisions to something
You've
that we already approved.
Yes. I'm Jessica Erickson, Administrator for the 300 Committee. I was here February 27th to present the conservation restriction, and you voted a municipal certificate that outlined the public benefit of a conservation restriction at T-Ticket Park. We've had a couple of revisions to the site plan itself, which have required some revisions to this conservation restriction. This is the time to do it because we have to have the CR finished and recorded with the Registry of Deeds by the end of May. So the state has already approved the revisions. We worked with Paula Parasu of the Compact of Conservation Trusts, and she was in touch with Irene Del Bono to confirm that these proposed changes would be acceptable, so that once it's reviewed here, once it's reviewed at the Selectmen, we'll send the final copy to the state so that we can execute it at the end of May. So the changes, I believe Jen printed the pages that show the redlined changes. On the top of page 2, the change simply is to include a reference to a project agreement between the Town of Falmouth Board of Selectmen and the state related to the $500,000 park grant that the town will receive as a reimbursement for purchasing a CR on this property. The next page with changes is page 6, reserve right number 11 at the bottom of the page. This reserved right covers all of the structures that we would ever intend to have on the property. In the first sentence of reserve right 11, we added the words remove and or replace, just so that it's very clear that at some point in time, we may end up removing some of these structures, replacing them. We'll have the right to construct, use, maintain, but we wanted to have the words remove and replace in there just to cover all of our bases in case we ever decide to remove the maintenance shed or something along those lines. The next revision relates to the existing garage. It's shown here on the property. This is T-Ticket Highway here. The house currently sits here. There's an existing detached garage here. Our original plan was to demolish that. We have since investigated the condition of the structure. There's a steel beam inside. It's structurally sound. It's set on a concrete slab. We think it makes more sense to keep that as a maintenance shed and to simply re-roof or re-side it as necessary. The original concept plan had shown a new maintenance shed, and I've got the plan here. The original plan had shown a new maintenance shed, and we reserved the right to construct a new maintenance shed. So essentially what we're doing is we're deleting any references to a shed on this side of the property, and we're reserving the rights necessary to maintain the existing. I believe that's it for that page. And then the next page, oh, excuse me, there is one other thing. This section of the CR references Exhibit A2. So Exhibit A2 is the concept plan for the park. So this is the plan that we intend to record with the CR, showing the location of the structures. The parking lot has also been moved, you'll notice, from the Quiznos side of the streetscape to the Settles Glass side. That allows us, because the maintenance shed is here, we thought it made sense to relocate the parking lot so that vehicles coming in to use the maintenance shed could easily access that. Fortunately, some of the grading on this side of the property is appropriate to have, there is an existing driveway that goes down the hill. So this is a way that we can better utilize some of the existing grading at the site. We will have to do some grading in order to accommodate this, but this approach helps reduce some of the site work needed in order to accomplish the parking lot and the maintenance shed. So this exhibit here would be recorded with the CR instead of the older plan. And then the last set of changes on page 7, item number 13, we were originally required to take down all of the structures on the property by July 10th. And the state has since agreed to allow us to keep one of the buildings because we're going to use it to maintain the park. The building has to be tied into a use at the park. So we've deleted language that requires us to take down this maintenance shed, but still requires, as the state has indicated, that we must take down the other structures by July 10th. And we're on our way, working through the permitting process to do that. We have also inserted another reserved right, number 19, and that would be the right to install, use, maintain, repair, remove, replace, or relocate an underground well. That would be situated somewhere near the maintenance shed. It's an idea that our board came up with in order to help us in the first few years when all the new trees and shrubs and plantings go in. Irene Del Bono strongly encouraged us to make sure that we leave language in there so that we can connect to town water, so that we don't preclude ourselves from doing something like that. So that's the irrigation well. And the final change is on page 8. It's simply plugging in information about the value of the conservation restriction. It's valued at $1.46 million, which is 34.25% of, the park grant represents 34.25% of the value of the CR, and that was something that the state wanted us to include. So those are the changes. I wanted to present this again because you've already voted the municipal certificate, but given the fact that we've made changes, we thought it was important to make sure that you knew what the changes were, make sure that they were acceptable to you, and if so, then we'll move forward with presenting this to the state for their final approval.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that.
I'll move that we accept the proposed changes.
Second.
And,
So now
motion in a
there's,
second.
yeah, so there's discussion here and I have questions from the audience.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion among the board? Any questions?
I am very glad to see that they are recycling that shed.
Good, yeah.
Can we almost call it repurposing?
Keeping it.
Absolutely.
Not ripping it down.
Yes.
Amen. Any questions from the audience? This time, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Thank you.
Thank you. And then there's a municipal certificate that we have to provide to the selectmen. I believe Jen gave you a copy of it.
It's right on their back table to be signed tonight.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jess.
Continuing further on today's agenda, we have requests to continue under determination of applicability, Black Beach Harbor Head Association. I'm not reading all that if it's getting continued. So,
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the applicant has requested a continuance for 1 month, so we will continue this until May 16th.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion from the board? Any from the audience? Hearing none? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Next, we have minutes to vote 3/21/2012. Does anyone have a motion?
I was not present, so.
We'll start with the minutes from the 21st. I've read and reviewed them, and they are in order, and I move that they be adopted. This is 3/21.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
I'm going to abstain too, I wasn't here.
Okay. 2 abstentions? Yep. Mary and
We
Maureen.
weren't here.
We weren't here.
All right, how about on 3/28?
Want to vote that one? Want to vote it?
We did,
We did?
Yeah.
Okay.
right?
Pardon?
We just voted the last one.
3/21?
The first minutes we voted.
Yes.
Yes.
I've read the minutes from 3/28, and there are some changes that I would like to see made. On the second page, it says who's there, and it has me listed as vice chairman, which is very flattering, but in fact, it's Tom Corriveau, so that correction should be made. Then, this is my history/English teacher coming out in me. There is no such thing as motioned in parliamentary lingo. It is to move to accept a motion. Throughout, wherever the word motion is, should be changed to moved.
Okay. Susan didn't those minutes, so we'll make the correction.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Other than that, content-wise, they get an A. But grammar, motion, gives them an F.
Courtney, I
Wow.
like that.
There's only a little bit of red ink on there.
So anyway, my motion is to accept the minutes as presented with the changes made.
We have a second.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
So moved. Continuing, request for determination of applicability. Phil Amaru, 201 Grand Ave, East Falmouth, Mass. For permission to raise the existing structure and construct a new 5-bedroom, single-family house with attached garage, deck, covered porch, patio, install a new paved driveway, Title V sewage disposal system, and the associated clearing, grading, and landscaping.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the staff has reviewed the project. We're recommending a -2 under the state and the bylaw with the resource area boundaries not confirmed.
So moved.
Second?
Yeah, hold, can we discuss this?
Yes.
I really have a problem with a project of this size. Not that there's any specific issues, I mean, we haven't really seen it. When you're raising a structure, particularly in this location, building an entirely new structure, there are certain normal standard conditions that apply to a project. And if this is going to be approved as an RDA, none of those routine standard conditions will apply or be enforceable. And so you got a very large project going on here with no supervision whatsoever, and I really have a great concern about that.
If we could, I'd like to ask the administrator, when this was reviewed by staff, if they had any concerns.
The only concern we have is we didn't really see drywall shown on the plan. We did speak with the applicant representative regarding that, and they did submit a revised plan addressing those issues. If you'd like to take a look at the plan, there it is. It's across from Grand Ave. Actually, here's the revised plan, Courtney, with those drywalls.
Now, aren't there a lot of routine...
There's no drywall detail on the plan. Is that something that the board may want?
Aren't there a lot of routine standard conditions that would normally be applied?
This is in land subject to coastal storm flowage only. It's outside of any buffer to any other resource area. We have reviewed projects within these types of areas before, but they were generally wooded lots that required a lot of excavation. This is the raise and rebuild of an existing structure. Mark reviews all the RDAs, and you know how thorough he can be.
Yeah, well, I'm looking, this is not in a location where I thought it might be. It's up the street, so to speak, not on the waterfront. That eases my concern
Well,
slightly.
It's right across from Grand Ave, on the corner of Grand Ave and Dartmouth.
And the border's over here, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I'm less concerned, but I think still a project to tear down and totally rebuild a new house, to me, should have a, even if it's routine, some kind of review, and so we could have our usual routine standard conditions, things like cleaning up the site, and, there's a lot of routine stuff that we shouldn't take for granted.
Absolutely.
That's my opinion.
I understand your position, Ed, so really it is up to the board.
Courtney?
Ed, I understand where you're coming from on this.
But
I think in a situation like this, and in similar situations where we have staff go out and review a project, and they determine that the impact of what's being proposed is minimal. And when you look at the plan, it's located across the street from the coastal bank and all of that. I am of the opinion that we want to try to keep the process by which we conduct our business somewhat simplified, and I think it serves the public and it serves the commission to have a project like this approved in the manner we are. I understand that we could certainly require a notice of intent, and we'd have everybody jumping through hoops, and we'd go through 3 or 4 weeks of, notices, butters, testimony, et cetera, and come up with the same conclusion with a rubber stamp bunch of conditions. And I don't think we've gained anything other than we've taken up our own time and we've taken up the applicant's money. And that's why we have an administrative staff, and I think we should work toward entrusting our staff to make decisions like this. I think it's the right way to go.
I just had one quick question. Is this a cesspool on the site, or is it an old septic?
I'm sure Mr. Burselli
SAS?
can answer that question for you.
Mike Warselli, Falmouth Engineering. There'll be a completely new Title V system put on the
I
site.
see that, but what's there now?
There's 2 cesspools
Okay.
under the
So
driveway.
we're improving the septic situation there. The size of the house really has not increased by the look of, I'm sure it's probably going to be,
No, we can't increase it. We're at the maximum.
maximum. And they're addressing all their driveway runoff, which they didn't before. So there are actually improvements to the site, which doesn't always happen. And I'm with you, Ed, I usually like to see more control, but in this situation, I'm comfortable with the fact that they're improving the site, and because it is in a flood zone, they're not going to have a basement, and it's, going to be a better situation.
Is there any other, Martha?
And you do sign off on this, right, Jen? Or you or Mark? Yeah, okay. My
Well, we'll
point,
sign the RDA.
right, that's what I mean.
And then it's done.
And then it's done. And then,
Pretty visible site.
Well, if there's any issues, we can't do anything about it.
We'll know.
one of my concerns when you get into the flood zone is there are so many properties that are within the flood zone. So if we, require an NOI for everything, there'd be a log jam.
And if there's no other board member that needs to,
And then
Put in.
I just want to clarify something to add. It doesn't mean that the board or the staff loses complete control if there is a scenario where a project, and I'm not saying this one, but if there's a scenario where a project that is either outside your jurisdiction or approved under an RDA within the flood zone is creating or causing an adverse impact to wetland resource areas, then this board and your staff can take action. So if there is a situation where there's runoff or anything like that and it's adversely affecting a sensitive resource area, we would absolutely step in. but it really is up to the board. If you'd like to see it under a notice, you can change, issue a positive threat. It's really up to you.
The motion on the table is to accept it as a negative, and I'm going to call for the vote if there's no other discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Abstained? So moved.
Thank you.
You guys can have that plan back if you don't want it. Thank you.
We're going to go by the continued requests for determinations, because that's a month away now. Request for hearing under a notice of intent. I'm using my cheat sheet. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authorities of the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision of the commission is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. Thank you. Tonight, the first on the agenda,
Both plans, guys?
Yeah, they're
they're
both,
coming.
yeah, they're both in there.
The first on the agenda is Ronald and Janice McHugh, 52 Mattapan Street, East Falmouth, Mass. For permission to construct a 4 by 110-foot pier walkway with 13 10-inch diameter pilings, 4 6 by 6-inch posts, support timbers, railings, 6 by 16-foot L section
Maureen.
to remove
thank you.
and replace with pervious pavers, remove a timber, and plant with native species and the associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. Jen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll save any of my comments until after Mr. Borselli's presentation. Just one brief thing you should have in front of you, I think Teresa placed in front of you, something that Mr. Borselli submitted today, which is just in response to a Division of Marine Fisheries letter that we just received this afternoon. So that's why that's in front of you.
Yeah, could you read that letter to us at some point, anyway?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good evening, Mr. Bussell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Michael Borselli from Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant, Ron and Janice McHugh. Mr. McHugh is with me this evening in the audience, as well as Jack Vaccaro from Vaccaro Environmental Consulting. Vaccaro Environmental Consulting did the shellfish survey and associated report that's part of our application. The property in question is at 52 Mattapan Street, and Mattapan Street has frontage on Perch Pond. Perch Pond is a smaller coastal abayment within the upper reaches of Great Pond. And on Perch Pond, today I think I counted 14 or 15 docks. My company has permitted 9 new docks since 2004 in this water body. As with all dock designs, there's a few preliminary steps that we take to ensure that we can meet your performance standards. The first of those steps is to verify that we have adequate water depth. Your requirements for water depth are 3 feet minimum at low tide. Perch Pond is relatively deep compared to the other ponds. In fact, in the situation here, we have an excess of 10 feet where the dock will, where the boat will be tied at the dock. Next, we verify with the harbor master that he has no issues concerning navigation. We submit a plan to him with a letter requesting that he comment. He did comment, and that was part of your application. He saw no issues with regard to navigation. At that point, we then go out and do a shellfish survey, and Jack Vaccaro from Vaccaro Environmental Consulting did a shellfish survey and the associated report. We do that next to make sure, before we submit our application, that we can meet your performance standards with regard to construction of docks, specifically 10.16, 1H, acknowledges that docks can coexist in areas that may have significant densities of shellfish, as long as the dock's terminal end is in a position where it is not within a minimum distance of 35 feet from the area where the significant density of shellfish occur. So the shellfish survey is a very important step before we submit an application, because it would be foolhardy to try to apply not knowing that and then discovering that you have an issue with shellfish. So this report was prepared, the dock was designed to make sure that we could meet that performance standard. The specifics of the shellfish survey can be reviewed if you have questions with Jack. Once we had determined where the significant shellfish densities were, and they're, as typical, concentrated in the nearshore areas, in the shallower water, in the water that has a better substrate, meaning a cleaner, more coarse sand bottom versus a mucky anoxic mud condition. And yes, we did find them in those areas. In order to meet the standard, we bridged that area and we placed the terminal end of the pier in a position where it provided that 35 feet. Now you may say, why is this dock so long? You're in 10 or 11 feet of water. Well, the very reason we're this long is to meet that 35-foot setback. We would be thrilled to make the dock shorter if we could, but your regulations would prohibit that, because then the mooring field would be less than 35 feet from the significant density of shellfish. In this case, though, even so, the water depth is 10 feet or more, and even if we reduce the length of the dock by 20 or 30 feet, the boat would still be in probably in excess of 7 or 8 feet of water. But the regulations don't have any leeway. They're cut and dry with regard to the separation from the density. So the dock was designed to meet that standard. The dock is traditional construction. You're very familiar with it. We're proposing to place it in a position where there's already an existing set of stairs that go down the coastal bank. Those stairs are really unnecessary and won't serve any real purpose. The access to the dock will be in that location by an elevated walkway with a series of stairs to get to a lower level at the end of the dock. If you look at the profile, the dock starts at the top of the coastal bank. The existing stairs are shown for reference, and there's a couple of sets of stairs to get to a lower level, and then the dock is at the lowest reasonable level relative to the water surface. And the access way is a 4-foot wide pile-supported access to the end of the dock, which will be an L in this case. And the L measures 6 foot wide by 16. You have a maximum size of 100 square feet, so it's been designed to be 96 square feet, which is less than the 100 square feet. We were able to space the pilings in a way that we actually completely bridge the area where the significant density is. The first span is proposed to be 20 feet, which is wider than we typically like, but it can be done with an extra stringer and some more structural support. And then we reduce down to a more typical 18 feet on center. The piling size is 10-inch diameter. They'll be driven, not jetted. The work will be done from a barge. I don't see any potential for bottoming of the barge in this case. The water depth's significant, much deeper than you're used to seeing. We're used to seeing water depths of 3 to 4 feet, and we have We've got some soundings that show 12 to 14 feet at the end, out past the end and a little bit further out. There'll be no CCA treated material. The L is a fixed dock, not a floating dock. The resource areas that the dock cross include the coastal bank and then a small beach. There is a small area of salt marsh to the south of the dock that we're not crossing. That's the main project. The McHughes just purchased a house, and we decided to include in the same application a request for permission to remove an old substandard deck, which is right. If you've been to the site, you noticed it's an actual wood patio, if that's the right term. The wood is flush with the ground. There's no structure, if you will. You don't step up onto it. It's flush with the ground. It's older, splintering timbers, certainly in a state of disrepair. We're proposing to remove that material and replace it with pervious paver patio. There's a cross-section of the construction of the patio on the plan. There's also a kind of a unique situation on part of the coastal bank where one of the previous owners, maybe they had access to some old planks. They decided to use planks on the slope to try to stabilize the slope instead of planting. And I mean, all that really accomplished was to smother out any vegetation that may have been there, and now those boards are rotting, and they're in the same condition as the deck material, and we're proposing that those be removed and that area be planted with native plantings to stabilize that slope. So the main project, of course, is the dock, but we're asking permission to do those other improvements under the same application. We received today by email from Division of Marine Fisheries a letter. As you know, they typically comment, and their letters are generally generic in nature. I bet if you compared most of the letters that you received, that you'll see a lot of, if not exactly the same language, similar language. And that's the case here for some of it, but they make a reference to something unique to Perch Pond. They make reference to the fact that in the year 2000, the town embarked on a dredging project to dredge the channel that connects Perch Pond to Great Pond, and at the time, it was a town funded, or the town was the lead applicant. The town was applying on their behalf, not private individuals, to dredge the channel. And there's a reference in this letter. I'll read the reference.
Could you maybe read the whole letter? I'm not suggesting there's issues, but now might be the appropriate time for us to know what the letter actually said.
We don't have a copy of that, by the way.
Here, I know, it's not even in our packet.
The letter from DMF came in this afternoon,
Right,
guys, by email.
Yeah, so could somebody just read it to us?
We submitted 12 copies at about 2:30 today, because we received it at noon.
You all have in front of you Mike's copy.
Yeah, that's what I have.
DMF's letter came in this afternoon.
Oh, it's in this one? Okay,
That's
put
Mike's
that back in.
response to the Division of Marine
No,
Fisheries.
Yeah, but the letter from DMF.
It's not in there now.
Where's the letter
There
from
you go.
DMF?
Thank you.
You received it. We received it this afternoon. I did not forward it to you.
Is there no one in there?
Mike, you want me to just read the letter from DMF for you?
I'd be happy to have you read it.
Number 2 thing. The Division of Marine Fisheries has reviewed the notice of intent by Ronald and Janice McHugh, 52 Mattapan Street, to construct a timber pier, remove a timber deck, to install a patio, and to stabilize a coastal bank on Perch Pond in the town of Falmouth with respect to potential impacts to marine fisheries, resource, and habitat. The project site site lies within mapped shellfish habitat for soft-shell clam, which is afforded protection under the Wetlands Protection Act. Mapped land containing shellfish is deemed significant to the interest of the Wetlands Protection Act and the protection of marine fisheries. A shellfish survey was conducted by Vaccaro Environmental Consulting on March 11th and March 17th, 2012. Higher densities of quahogs and soft-shell clam resources were found between 20 feet and 50 feet from mean high water. According to Falmouth Conservation Commission density thresholds, this area is considered significant to shellfish. The project site is currently classified as prohibited by marine fisheries. Although sections of Perch Pond have been periodically classified as conditionally approved over the past decade, the shellfish classification of an area does not determine if a project will affect the natural resources of that area. Abundance and function of a resource in an area can be adversely impacted by projects regardless of whether or not an area is opened or closed to shellfishing. While the shellfish in the pond are not available for direct human consumption, shellfish are still considered significant to the interest of the Act as they serve as forage for finfish and other species, improve water quality, and provide brood stock for the waters of Falmouth. In the spring of 2000, the town of Falmouth requested authorization to dredge a 40 by 600 foot channel between Perch Pond and Great Pond with the stated intention of improving water quality. In the public notice issued to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, file number 2000-01105, the town stated that it, quote, does not intend to add any new structures such as docks or boat ramps and does not plan any new moorings for Perch Pond. During the review of the proposal, During the review of this proposal, serious concerns were expressed by the Division of Marine Fisheries, NOAA Fisheries, and the Environmental Protection Agency, that's the EPA, not the DEP, over the ultimate success of the project, as well as potential impacts to shellfish and eelgrass resources where construction of new docks to occur. Continuation of recent new docks and other intended increase in boat use for this shallow embayment will not only negate any improvements that may have been realized from dredging, but will likely result in the impacts to productive shellfish habitat found outside the entrance to the pond. For example, propeller dredging has been observed recently by the Falmouth Department of Natural Resources personnel at shellfish beds near the mouth of Perch Pond. Marine Fisheries has the following concerns with the project. 1, land-based construction equipment on the coastal bank and intertidal areas during construction will damage these resource areas. 2, the storage of construction equipment and building materials on the coastal bank or in the intertidal area may damage sensitive habitats. 3, fuel spills from refueling and construction equipment on the coastal bank or in intertidal areas may adversely impact these resources. And 4, the use of a construction barge may damage sensitive marine habitat if allowed to ground during periods of low water. Compaction of sediments may destroy marine vegetation and marine mammals in the intertidal area, and prolonged anchoring of a barge in shallow water with swift currents will scour the bottom of the barge. Could you please read point 3 there again? I didn't hear it all. Fuel spills from refueling of construction equipment on the coastal bank or intertidal areas may adversely impact these resource areas.
Mr. Chairman? I think a lot of the last, the tail end of that letter, the bullets, if you will, the things that they are often concerned with, you see over and over again in letters from DMF, they're speculation on what may happen, what could happen, and you have the ability as a commission to condition to prevent those things from happening. So that's not new information. The first page about the dredging and those issues is probably unique to this water body, but I think it's only fair if we're going to read that letter that I read my letter in response into the record. So if I could.
Yeah, please do.
My letter is in response dated April 18th, and it's addressed to Betsy Gladfeld, the chairman, regarding 52 Mattapan Street application. We received a copy of the letter from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries today by email, dated April 18th, 2012. As you know, there is a public hearing scheduled for this evening regarding the proposed pier at the above referenced property. The purpose of this letter is to respond to the letter from Division of Marine Fisheries. The DMF letter indicates that the area is significant to shellfish according to the Falmouth conservation density thresholds. What the letter fails to acknowledge is that the Falmouth Conservation Commission's regulations found at FWR 10.16(1)H2 allow for new docks if the area designated by the applicant as the mooring field is more than 35 feet from the area containing significant densities of shellfish. The pier has been designed to meet this regulation. The shellfish survey and accompanying report were performed during the initial stages of the pier design. The shellfish survey was performed during the initial stages of the design to ensure that the applicant could meet this specific standard of the regulations. It would have been futile to advance an application before the Conservation Commission if the project did not meet this performance standard. Therefore, the issue raised within paragraph 2 of the DMF letter is moot because the dock has been designed to provide the required 35-foot minimum separation from an area containing significant shellfish densities. Paragraph 4 of the DMF letter gives historical background related to a previous dredging project that occurred in the spring of 2000, which was 12 years ago. The paragraph goes on to quote a statement within the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers public notice, which states the town, and I put emphasis on the word town, does not intend to add any new structures such as docks or boat ramps, and does not plan any new moorings for Perch Pond. While the town as a body may not intend to add any new structures such as docks or boat ramps, the town cannot commit individual property owners with individual property rights to the same condition. Over the past 10 years, our office has designed, applied for, and been issued permits by this commission to construct 9 new docks within Perch Pond. In most cases, there were areas containing significant densities of shellfish found in the near-shore areas of the waterfront. In those cases, the docks were able to be designed to meet the performance standard referenced above that provided adequate separation between the area of significant density of shellfish and the area designated as the mooring field. To single out this specific application appears to be an inequity to this applicant. This applicant cannot be held to any higher standard than previous applicants. The 5th paragraph of the DMF letter goes on to state, continuation of the recent proliferation of new docks and the intended increase of boat use in this shallow abatement will not only negate any improvements that have been realized from dredging, but will likely result in impacts to the productive shellfish habitat found inside the entrance to the pond. That's a quote. This statement's not supported by any scientific facts, background, or studies to give it credence. It's simply a statement. There's nothing referenced in the letter to back that up. Perhaps the entrance from Great Pond to Perch Pond should be redredged to improve condition. Often narrow channels connecting to embayments must be maintenance dredged on a regular schedule to continue to allow for adequate channel depth and flushing. The town of Falmouth, on a routine basis, every spring maintains maintenance dredges channel entrances into the coastal abatements using the county dredge. The county dredge dredges and disposes of the dredge spoils on nearby beaches. To single this coastal abatement out as being different is without scientific basis. Finally, the letter provided by DMF provides 4 bullets of concern. Those are the standard bullets that you typically see on the last page. In response to those bullets of concern, we offer the following, and these could be conditions. No land-based construction equipment will transit the coastal bank or into tidal areas during construction. No storage of construction equipment or building materials will occur on the coastal bank or within the intertidal area. No refueling of the construction equipment will occur on the coastal bank or within the intertidal areas. The construction barge used during construction will not ground out during installation. Work will be performed during times of higher tides. And I had already referenced that water depths are relatively deeper than you're used to seeing. If you refer to the depth soundings on the plan, it becomes immediately clear the average water depth for the majority of the dock is in excess of 5 feet. In fact, the water depth at the terminal end of the dock is in excess of 10 feet. No prolonged anchoring of a barge will occur in shallow water. These suggested conditions could be incorporated into an order of conditions that if you determine that the application is approvable. We trust that our responses to the DMF letter satisfy the Conservation Commission.
Thank you for reading that into the record. Is there any more to your presentation after that?
I'm happy to answer any questions about my presentation.
Jen, do you have any concerns?
I have a few questions and a couple of comments. First of all, Mike, Harbor Master's inspection was done on a plan dated March 14th, 2012. This plan is March 20th. What's the difference between the two plans? This has happened before. We've asked you to always submit a revised copy of the plan to the Harbor Master. So his revised plan dated 3/14, and the one I'm looking at is 3/20.
I gave him a new plan, and I thought I gave you a new letter.
Nope, so if you submit the new letter to me, I'm gonna need that, okay?
Yep.
Thank you. Second of all, a quick comment or a quick request to Mr. Vaccaro. In the future, Jack, would you please put, I know he's here, I just saw him, oh, there he is. Jack, could you just put the plan date that you based your self-list survey off of in your report?
Yes.
Thank you. Just so that we all know that it's the same plan that we're looking at, I would appreciate that, thank you. Continuing with the dock, Mike, do you know offhand what the water depth is at the entrance from Perch Pond to Great?
I know by observation, not by measurement, because I happened to be there today,
Okay.
looking at it, and it was closer to low tide than high, and there's only about a 16-inch maximum, I think, tidal range, but it was still closer to low tide than high, and the water was flowing, the channel was narrow, but the water depth was definitely at least chest high.
Okay.
The width of the channel was what seemed to be in question. It was only probably 8 or 10 feet wide. So a boat would have to
Yes.
aim for that.
This is great.
How's the barge getting in?
It's flat.
How's the barge getting in? The barge has to get in there at high tide, and it's a small work platform barge.
Okay.
And he can get in there.
It's pretty
Okay.
flat there.
Okay.
Once, he's got to get in on a high tide, and then he has to get
Yeah,
out.
and they have to let us know when they're coming in.
Yeah.
Okay. Going to the patio. I went out there and I'm like, what is this thing? How far down do you need, because your cross-section is not to scale on the patio, and my concern is it's that structure that you're, for lack of a better term, that you're replacing the planks on the ground, they are right at the edge of that coastal bank. I mean, they're right there. So I'm kind of wondering how far down you need to excavate in order to put the patio in.
Right.
Especially since you have those wooden timbers lining the bank. If you remove those and start digging the patio, I'm afraid that whole bank might kind of collapse. So I'm just wondering what kind of depth that patio needs to go to.
Well, if you look at the cross-section, yeah, it isn't to scale, but the suggested thicknesses of the two layers are
Okay.
4 to 6 inches.
4 to 6 inches and 6 to 8 inches.
Right.
So you're looking at a foot,
We're looking at approximately what?
foot and a half, something like
It's
that.
basically just
No, foot.
to prepare a bed that will accept the water that runs through the joints in the pavers. If you place them on, we've talked about this.
Oh, and then 2 inches. so
On
you're looking
dense
at
graded
16.
blend, you have an impervious patio. If you build it the way the manufacturer recommends, then it can drain. So the idea is to dig down to this coarse sand here, put the sub-base and then the base material, the bedding material, if you will, for the pavers, so that, down, so that it's a pervious layer that the water can get through and then get into the sand.
And how are you going to ensure that that bank is stabilized during that construction? And you know what it's like out there. I mean, you take those timber boards out, there's nothing underneath them but bare soil.
Right, I mean.
So that's kind of my concern.
Yeah, well, the work will be done by hand in that area. If you wanted us to pull back a foot or two, we could. The area is proposed to be immediately planted with some deep-rooted native plant, so there'll be no heavy equipment. I think that it's
If you could possibly pull it back a foot, foot and a half, I just think that it's just too close. The board may have another opinion for those who went out there. But it's really right against that, and you have that landscape timber things, and then you have the board, which is the boards that are holding up that bank, which is it's fairly steep, so.
Right.
And I'm gonna ask Ted on like what kind of plantings they could put on the bank, because digging in shrub material there might not be the best thing for that bank, so.
Well, we were looking for guidance on that. I was actually thinking in terms of maybe using the American beach grass, just because I know it's got a deep-rooted system.
I don't think beach grass would do well there. It's just not the appropriate habitat for a beach grass, not along that bank. No. But anyway, we'll get back to that. So, and, yeah, I think those were my only questions. If you could provide that harbor master letter, it just, so it makes it all
Yep.
nice and clean for the file. I appreciate it.
You all set, Jim?
Yes.
Enough of this is yours.
It is mine. As far as the dock goes, I understand the project, the narrative was pretty descriptive, but I don't really understand the patio as well as the embankment, the restoration. That wooden armoring was pretty crazy. I've never seen that before. Someone spent a lot of time on that.
It's homemade.
It was, obviously.
That whole that deck was homemade.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. But when you remove the wooden armoring, what's the plan? What's the methodology?
Well, I would expect they'd remove the metal armoring, they'd scarify, loosen up the soil, get it prepped so that it can accept some plant material. That would be a small type plant material that, size-wise, to start, that has a deep-rooted system, and then you just fill the slope with pockets of the stuff. Let it root, get it put down jute mesh, you
Okay.
know.
That's absolutely.
Keep
Yeah, I was
everything
gonna-
That's the key.
stable. In fact, we were actually thinking about putting one biolog at the bottom, just to sort of temporarily keep the bottom in place of any material. We had actually looked at doing the whole thing on biologs, but it didn't seem to make any sense. It seemed like there was an opportunity, if it's done properly and then maintained and watered and babysat, to get the roots started. On the other side of that stairway, there's, I think it's Cotoneaster, is that the right? It's not a native, but there's something on the other side. I wouldn't propose that, but I'm just saying, it's only, the rest of the bank is very stable. And that's temporarily stable, but as those boards are already rotting, as soon as those are removed, it's just going to be obviously bare soil. So it was basically going to, the methodology was work by hand, scarify, jute mesh, jute netting, and then hand install almost big plug, small size plants, just staggered rows densely on that bank, and let the root systems take over.
Okay. What about the excavation for the pervious patio?
At most, and I don't even know that it would be this, it would be handwork, and I think you could condition if it needs to be handwork, within a certain distance of the bank, and maybe a small, Kubota size mini excavator could remove the boards and then scrape the soil. You can gain access with the mini excavator this direction and just scrape it up. Almost handwork, but mechanical handwork, if there's such a term. I mean, picture the smallest mini excavator you could get, just to kind of help with the labor. Or if you think it needs to be done by hand, make it a condition that it be done with shovels.
What about getting it out of there? Get a truck back there?
No, I don't think you could get a truck back there. Good old-fashioned wheelbarrows.
Okay. Yeah, and I agree with Jen. I think you need to stay a little bit away from that edge of that bank with the excavation as well as the patio. That's about it.
I'm going to start with Mary.
Yeah, this is the thing that I've been thinking about the most in this project also, and I'm wondering, I don't know, Ted might would say, what an appropriate plant material is for those boards on the bank, and how long it might take to stabilize, and perhaps delay the patio part of the project until that's accomplished. And in the DMF letter, if I understood about everything that was being read, it seems to me that the DMF letter kind of has an implicit contradiction in it, in that they're saying the town said no more building, and then they admit that there's been a proliferation of buildings.
If I could just comment on that one briefly. I think the town committed that they weren't going to have like a harbor management plan that included ever building a boat ramp, making a mooring basin in here. The town doesn't have any land on this water. It's all private land. The town couldn't, I don't think the town has the authority to commit unless they put a moratorium, as Jen and I talked about, on docks on that water body. If the town had the intention of never having new docks on that, then they would have had to go to town meeting and get a moratorium on Perch Pond. They didn't take that step. And they used, the word intends is used. That's sort of a vague term in and of itself. So the town really doesn't have any authority to mandate that private homeowners not apply for new docks unless they put a moratorium. Now, there was a time when the town had a moratorium on Bourne's Pond for new docks. You can't have big boats on Bourne's Pond anyway, but there was a moratorium to study Bourne's Pond probably 15 years ago now. So that would have been their opportunity. Put a moratorium.
All set, Mary?
That's all for me, thank you.
Ted?
Yeah, I'll go back, I'll do the deck thing. I think it's a real problem.
The bank or the deck?
Both. I think if you add up your numbers here, the brick, I mean, because you're treating this all, you're showing in your detail the finished grade going out beyond here, which will never well be on that curb. If in fact the patio is taking in the same outline of the deck.
Right.
So the finished grade is going to be more bound where the subgrade is or something of that, beyond that curb. That curb needs dead men in it, and you're adding a lot of weight. And you add that all up, it's more than 1.5 feet. It's, 3 inches for the brick, and you got the 2 inches, bedding course, then you got 4 to 6 inches with the graded stone, then you got another 8 inches with the subgrade. It adds up to over 1.5 feet. It's a lot of weight. And you're putting it right on the edge of that thing, and I was looking at that, I go, I can't believe how long that's been there. And it's probably the only thing that could work. That's a 1-to-1 slope.
Mm-hmm.
That is a 1-to-1 slope. There's nothing going to hold that. Once you take those away, it's going to slide. It's going to subside. It'll go back to its angled repose. And I don't know, I don't know of any plant that's going to grow on a 1-to-1 slope to begin with. I mean, the English ivy's growing there, But I looked underneath English ivy, and there's erosion underneath it. If you look to the left of the stairs going up, and I looked underneath a couple of the planks, and there's erosion under them, but it's holding up everything pretty well. But, you know, I really, in a funny way, that floating deck is probably the best solution for that situation, because it's going to offer the least amount of weight and, you know, weight on the end of the bank, and it's going to sort of stifle the erosion too. I don't know, could you consider, I don't know how much excavation you need either, because when you start looking at your finished floor in the bottom and you look at your grades, you can almost kind of scrape away and build up. This doesn't, you don't have a slope on it, doesn't need a slope because it's taking it all in, but still there's going to be a lot of water in there and water pressure coming out underneath this. You know, it's going to find the outlet, and it's going to be underneath that curb.
Well, just to respond, we never thought that you would want to entertain replacing it with another deck. We thought you would want to see something like a pervious paver, a pervious surface, not an impervious surface. I mean, I'm sure my client would more than likely be willing to consider alternatives that would include like a timber patio that's built on sleepers in the same position.
Yeah,
Maybe use
I
like,
was thinking of sleepers and actually somehow cantilevering it out towards the edge of that, and that's going to start going once you move those planks off.
yeah, well, putting aside the slope for a minute, just the deck, we could substitute something. I mean, we thought that you'd be receptive to a pervious paver patio to replace that whole thing, but, you know, I can rethink that with my client. We have to continue this because of a DEP file number anyway.
Actually, you did get that very late.
We did, because
Yeah.
I checked on my phone about 5 o'clock.
And then it came in about, I want to say 6:10.
If I was going to go to the expense of putting something there, I definitely, I mean, and you have a deck, I'd replace the deck, and I'd pull my sonotubes back and have a cantilever on the end.
Yeah.
Because I know that bank's going to go, and you can jute mat it all you want, but one-to-one slope, yeah, you could grow, anything is probably going to grow in there once you put the little holes, but how much root hold you're going to get, and whether, once that jute goes in 18 months, I think you're going to subside it. So that's why I would have my foundations, my sonotubes back off of it, at least.
Sure, we can do that.
And almost figure you're gonna lose it.
But we have to do something, if we remove those planks, we have to think of a solution to stabilize it after remove the planks, whether we don't remove them now, or we think, we could be proactive and try to deal with it, or wait till it becomes a problem and they rot more.
Well, you're going from the base of the slope 8 feet to the top of the slope 15 in ½ inch.
Yeah, which is 10 feet.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
I thought you'd have a solution, Mr. Durka.
I can't, that barrel-cladded coastal bank is the best solution. That was a good job for how many years it lasted. I mean, obviously, it's not allowed, but it's amazing it worked.
Well, I mean, I could come back in here with a vinyl bulkhead
Please
design.
don't.
If you want.
Yeah. That's it. That's all I can say.
Mike, I think Ted has expressed my concern very well. I add to it that was created by filling, when they created the foundation, I'll bet. And if we're lucky, it's sand. You pull it back, and it's a refrigerator, you got another problem. So personally, I'm in favor of that deck and pulling that back, sloping it, taking care of it now proactively rather than saying go. I think you got a problem there. Two, I'd like to thank you for your efforts to get that dock in and meet all our regulations. You thought about everything and pushed things back as best you could. I appreciate that.
I have a landscape architect and an engineer that still haven't given me a solution to stabilizing the bank.
Well, we're not done reviewing the board. I'm sure that there's going to be more conversation about that. Marty?
I'd like to know if it was a permitted deck. Any aerials?
I don't know. It's ancient, I know that.
How ancient? I mean, there's got to be aerials.
We see it going back, and I kind of anticipated this question when I went out there, and I'm like, oh, they're going to want to know if this thing is
Yeah, that's the
permitted.
question I usually
I think
ask.
that the engineer should have, it would have been nice, Mike, if you did that research, because then all
I
the
have
efforts to
photos.
try to
Hang
fix
on,
it
Laura.
would be prudent. But if it's not even a legal structure, you know, we're spending an awful lot of time on something that we don't even know if it was legal.
One, we don't have,
I know we wouldn't have permitted it in the last 10 years.
we don't have any permits on it.
Okay.
Okay, number one. Number two, you can see it in the 2009, 2005, 98 aerials, the 93, and going back, they're just too blurry, but I'll send those down for the
No,
board.
if there's no permit and it's only 90, 98 or whatever, that doesn't justify
I
it
can
being
send them
there.
all down
Yeah.
there, but those don't show
So-
anything really, so.
If we could get, maybe you, Mike, could find better aerials to just, to
Yeah,
prove it's.
Sure,
That
I'll
would be
try.
helpful,
It's-
Mike.
I
That it's
didn't-
been there before the Wetlands Protection Act, and if it is, then I think we should really start thinking about how to redesign it. But if it's not a permitted deck, then my recommendation was that we don't even, that it goes. And, you pull it back and go for a new type of structure.
Sure. Pulling it back some, I think, is certainly an idea, a couple, 1 or 2 feet, just to get a little bit further away.
Yeah,
from
I would think that you'd get it back enough so that it is going to not create an environmental problem, and that's what we're here for. And we haven't even asked for, I know that you have cohog mitigation for the dock, and it's in soft shell clam habitat, so that's another issue in itself. But for the deck, why we don't ask for more mitigation for docks, we used to ask for buffer strips when docks were put in, and now we don't even ask for that. It's, they just put a dock in and no improvement is given. The patio needs a huge improvement, and the drainage situation, I'm not an architect and I'm not an engineer, but I know dirt, and
Yeah.
that is gonna be a big problem there. I think the Rube Goldberg approach was fairly amazingly good.
What's I don't know what that means.
Just making
The
it up
jury
as they went, jury rigging.
Ah, you mean the original
Yes,
installers?
the
of
original
it?
install. That's why I'm quite sure it was probably not permitted. Anyway, I would like to see, when you have projects like this come in front of us, this is gonna be an issue, to have the plant material. It's nice to ask us for our help and trying to work through this, but if you had given us a little bit more than us sitting here designing an awful lot tonight, like you're talking jute mats, biolog, none of that's on the plan. So we know you're gonna be continued, but you got some good feedback from us. Is there any limit of work? I'm not sure I see one.
No, I don't know where would you want a limit of work?
Maybe between the patio, where you're gonna be working with a mini excavator and removing all that stuff on a very fragile bank. Usually we require a limit of work between a resource, and there's none there. So maybe that could be the area that once you put your limit of work up, after you do your patio, that would be also vegetated, which would, and the pervious pavers, I have been watching pervious pavers in action along with pervious pavement, and I don't have all the data in front of me because, it's just hen scratching that I do. The problem is in the wintertime, when it's frozen, it's a sheet. There's no permeability whatsoever in them. The fines get in them over time, and they don't work very well after a very short period of time, and especially pervious pavement. So I know everybody keeps touting the little gaps in the sand, but when it sheets off, it's got velocity, it's got volume, and with frozen ground, it is impervious.
I'll
So,
never propose it ever again.
yeah, well, I'm
Thought it was a
I'm
good
not an
thing.
advocate of pervious pavers. I think that it's an oxymoron. I really don't think it
We'll look at
exists.
we'll look at the age of it, make sure it's permitted or grandfathered,
Okay.
and I will recommend we probably just replace it with decking, maybe the new deckings, the new composite decking materials
I mean, it's more pervious than the pervious paver
with a gravel
underneath.
on sleepers.
Exactly.
But
Um,
I have to look at the
Yeah,
age of it.
you'll come up with something. Where does a barge set for the first two pilings? Or are they from land, over the coastal bank?
The barge can really get to a position which is right over here and still be in like 6 feet of water. If you look at-
I'm talking about the two up here that are right off the coastal bank.
Yeah, he can reach from there. This here at the base.
How's he gonna reach, Mike?
These two here are not pilings, they're 6x6 posts that will be hand installed.
And how are they gonna be put in, augered? By hand? Hand dug?
dug.
Okay.
And then
The first real set is in the tidal zone.
The 3.1 foot area, or 3.7
Well,
foot
I'm
area?
pointing at it where the angle point is,
3.7 foot.
and that barge can reach that and be in 4 or 5 feet.
Well, barges don't really reach.
Well, the crane or the rig on the barge can reach that, no question.
They'll
Talking
usually
about-
bridle them in and then, okay. And you say that there won't be any disturbance, and that you won't jet, but we all know they jet.
Well-
You spud and you jet. So we need
say
those
this on-
calculations for the area of spudding and jetting. Because when the spuds go down, they have displaced bottom and shellfish, if there's shellfish there.
Well, there aren't shellfish there, that's the good news.
All right,
Where the barge would be,
there is shellfish there, but that's okay. 1A is right at the 4 foot mark,
Oh,
where it
there's
says
one.
25.
they
Well, there's
found
one.
one.
One that they found.
I'll
means it's
personally
habitat.
dig that one out and
But it's
relay it.
habitat. It's not just the animal, it's the habitat also.
Right, but that's a anoxic mud, and one quahog happened to hang on to dear life there.
The L allows boats to dock on the north side,
Yes,
so you are planning to put a boat on the north side.
the
And
plan,
are there going to be two boats, one
the
boat?
plan
Because you
is.
didn't give us a mooring field.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, there's more.
Out here, but if they're going to dock on the north side is,
No, the plan is to dock where the mooring field is.
and that's it.
The plan is to only have one boat. If there was some severe certain wind direction where it made sense to temporarily tie the boat on the side for its protection, instead of having it here
I'm not gonna tell you that the owner may not tie the boat there.
in that condition, if there's a certain wind direction that would lend itself to tying there, but the goal is to tie here, unless there's some threat to the boat, and then you might tie there just until the threat's over. And it's still,
I just don't want this to be a mini marina. It's deep water, you know, and as soon as you put an L, it becomes dockage for more boats. I mean, it's the
Well,
nature of boating.
you have the ability to.
We have the ability to condition it, and we're all gonna go down there on a daily basis to make sure no boat's tied to the side of the boat. I
Well,
mean,
you're
We
also
can
a-
put a railing on the side so they can't use it.
If you feel you need the railing, then make it a condition, but then you'd have to make sure he doesn't take the railing down. So, I mean, we're talking about
If we just didn't
enforcement.
permit the dock, then we wouldn't have to worry about any of it, would we?
Or if it was just a T, you wouldn't have to worry about it, so maybe you could look at putting a T there
T in.
instead.
No, we don't want a T, and you don't have a regulation that prohibits
Okay.
Ls. And the reason we don't want a T is because then we're less than 25 feet from an extension of a property line. And then we need to get permission from a neighbor, which we don't think we need to go. We shouldn't have to go and ask permission from a neighbor for a dock that
Okay.
meets your regulations.
All right, then the next thing is, and I did read several DMF letters, and this one actually is not a boilerplate. Some of the stuff is boilerplate, but there are very few places in town that we get DMF, I mean, not so much DMF, but we didn't read in the Town of Falmouth Department of Natural Resources, and they're not as boilerplate as DMF is. And Chuck Martinson from the town is very concerned with this, and I don't know if anybody got that
Read
letter.
it. Read it
But-
into the record.
As this was dated on April 12th. As indicated in the survey, this area is significant quahog and soft-shell clam resource. As I have stated in the past, the soft-shell clam resources in the town of Falmouth have struggled over recent years for various pressures, including diminished water quality and habitat loss. Restoration of soft-shell clam beds requires both significant physical labor to protect from predation and long-term monitoring. This area of Perch Pond is currently classified by the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries as prohibited to the taking of shellfish. Over the past 10 years, this classification has been modified between prohibited and conditionally approved for the taking of shellfish within sections of the pond. Much of the modification to the classification over the past 10 years was as a result of dredging and the return of dynamic flow and ebb tide delta on either side of the mouth. Independent of the current classifications, this area is and has been important to the recruitment of soft-shell clam beds in Great Pond. Members of our staff have observed incidences of propeller dredging through the soft-shell clam beds in the vicinity of the mouth of Perch Pond in past years. I believe documentation of these incidents are on file with DMF. Additionally, in the past, Falmouth Conservation Commission has taken testimony from commercial harvesters on the importance of the mouth of this pond on the Great Pond side during winter months, as it tends to freeze later and remain bountiful. The commission might be interested in consultation with the harbor master about future dredging plans and navigation limits. So again, you have offered mitigation of quahogs, and that's, we have soft-shell clam habitat and no soft-shell clam mitigation, and we know it's almost impossible, so.
Right.
Yeah, so again, you know.
Can I speak to that, Mr. Chairman? I mean, we've had this dialogue on a lot of docks, and that letter there wasn't one thing in that letter that was specifically addressed to this project. It was a general characterization of the conditions in Perch Pond. In fact, it focused on the entrance. We're not at the entrance. We're way inside. So, again, I say to you, we've bridged the shellfish habitat. That's the best way we can mitigate against damage to soft shell habitat. And it's soft shell and quahog habitat. I think that Mr. Martinson's letter reinforces the fact that it's impossible, almost impossible, to mitigate by propagation of soft shell, because you can't propagate soft shell clams easily. This dock won't have an impact on soft shell clams because it bridges it. There's certainly no issue of propeller wash. We're in 12 feet of water, 11 feet of water. So this structure and its installation doesn't impact soft shell habitat.
That's all, thank you.
Ed?
Yeah, just a couple of things. A question, Mr. Borselli, what's the draft, do you know, of the barge that comes in?
The average draft of that barge is 18 to 24 inches.
Which barge?
Well, the barges
The work
that I've
barge.
seen build these
Right.
docks.
And you said before the draft of the depth of the bar at high tide anyways?
At low tide, it was, by observation, looked to be, if I tried to wade through there today, which I wouldn't, it would have been up to here.
All right, so you're not expecting any problem in getting the barge in there without grounding out, which is a
No.
problem? Okay, I think it should be a condition that the barge, should not ground out coming over the barge, just to make sure. Second thing, I just want to address something I just heard about the mitigation here, what's it, 10,000 quahogs being offered. It's just my understanding, things I've heard, and I think Mr. Martinson has said it in the past, as I recall, that the propagation of soft-shell clams is very, very difficult and hasn't actually been very successful when tried. I believe he encouraged us not to even try because it hasn't worked out very well. I just want to add that's my understanding. And finally, I did ask a question earlier about, I wanted that letter from DMF read because I did read your submission when I first walked in here tonight. I'm very familiar with some of the history of this Perch Pond area. I do recall the dredging issues way back when, and I do recall sitting on this commission when some of the first docks came in, and Mr. Borselli, I probably, as you know, sat through most of the 9 docks that you brought before us, and probably, I don't think you have a monopoly there completely, so there was probably a few other docks by other engineers as well. And so when I see this thing, and I hear this thing from DMF being read, it comes as a little bit of a surprise to me, and I'm wondering where they've been, because they're sort of like 8 years too late. And I think all of these issues, if they were going to be raised, really should have been raised a long time ago. And at this point in time, if you got any concerns, say, the horses a long, long time ago, 9 or more already left that barn, so it's a little too late to be closing the door, in my opinion. And I would also say that your response that you prepared for us is, in my view, a good and accurate reflection of what happened, and I think it's appropriate and correct to me. The only thing I wouldn't comment on is the discussions of dredging, because that's a whole nother issue, and that's not an issue you really want to get into. But other than that, so I don't see any problems related to the DMF concerns. I think they're too late. They should have been raising those concerns when all the other docs went in here. And as you say, it's not really fair to be bringing it up at this point in time. And so I can't accept that. So those are my comments.
Courtney?
First, on the dock, I think in itself, it appears to meet the regulations. You've satisfied most of those conditions. There is a question about mitigation and soft shell clam restoration and all that. Chuck Martinson's letter and DMF's letter does raise some concerns for me. Ed's correct. It's too bad they didn't raise these concerns earlier in previous applications, and his comment about the closing the barn door after the horses fled, on one hand is appropriate, but the other side of the coin is that one of the things that we're charged with doing here in looking at our regulations and in looking at impact is the cumulative impact of activity. And I think that that's what DMF is concerned about. That's what Chuck Martinson's concerned about, is the cumulative impact of these docks on the environmental health of this pond. That's what's going to give me concern as I deliberate about this project. Moving on to the other thing, I share Maury's concerns about pervious pavers and what you're planning to do there. I think there is a solution, assuming that this is a legally permitted deck, and that is to simply rebuild it as a deck on the ground, and to put 10 inches of 1.5 inch stone underneath. I would also feel that it would be quite appropriate, given what you're going to be doing with the bank, to perhaps pull the thing back 3 feet, so that it comes no closer than 3 feet at the top of that bank. You can follow that line out and then maybe go square across so that the deck comes out to 15 feet, except where you nibble off a corner. But just, I've had very good luck with building decks on the ground, using either pressure treated and, mahogany decking and that kind of thing. They hold up. And the important thing is there's no question about perviousness, because if you have 1/4 inch to 3/8 inch spacing between the decking, it's like 1x4, and you've got stone underneath, any of the water, there's going to be no runoff in the wintertime, springtime, summertime, and if this is a legal structure, that's probably the way to go. I have no other comments.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Please.
I'd like to just address a few things that Mr. Barcelli said and then what the board said. First, Mike, I don't want to hear you say you're never going to propose permeable paver patios again. I think in certain instances, they may work. So to take the stance that, and it may have just been a statement, it's a site-by-site thing, and this site's just very, very unique. So it's just a site-specific thing. I know we've seen them before. I'm thinking of a project, I want to say along Great Bay, but I could be wrong, where you proposed a permeable patio, and it was a good solution in that sense. So I don't want you to close the door on that. Maury and some of the board members may disagree with me, but I think in certain instances, it's a good solution. Second of all, to Ed and Courtney, I can think of 6 docks that DMF has provided you the same exact letter, as well as Mr. Martinson. So I think it is grossly unfair for you to say that the barn door has closed and where were they for the past 8 years? Because DMF has been regurgitating these same comments to this board for the past 8 years regarding docks in Perch Pond. So I will be providing you with the DMF letters for the last 9 docks. And I can guarantee that at least 70 to 80% of them, after a while, when the docks started showing up in Perch Pond, DMF started writing these letters. This is not the first time you've seen that language. And that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Are there any other comments from the board?
I just had one more. Mike, when you stated in your letter to us that the DMF, it says this statement is not supported with any scientific facts, background, or studies to give it credence, which was for the docks being in place and prop wash or whatever. But needless to say, you haven't given us any scientific data that the prop wash doesn't have impact, or the jetting, or the pile driving, or any of that. So it works both ways.
Well, yeah, no, because I don't have to. I meet your performance standards. There's a presumption that that there's no impact to your wetland.
That's a presumption. But we all know that if you put you jet a pile, and you put spuds down, you have created an environmental impact at that point. Am I correct?
There's a very temporary environmental impact to installing a dock. The dock is a stationary, immobile object after it's installed.
But the damage is done when you install it.
There's no damage. There's temporary turbidity in an area that's already mucky.
How big around are the pilings?
10 inch.
10 inch. So 10 inches of Commonwealth waters is now gone. Area for shellfish to propagate in is now gone. Am I correct? Okay, that's all, thank you. Just wanted to make that point.
And in a water body that probably has 3 million square feet of bottom. So we're talking about some de minimis, insignificant amount of
It all
bottom here.
depends on which side of the table we sit on, Mike.
Is there any other questions from the board? Open up to the audience. Is there any comments from the audience? Seeing you have to come up, identify yourself, and speak to the mic, please.
My name is Ron McHugh. I'm the owner of the property. First of all, and secondly of all, I'd like to thank you for the feedback that I got on the deck and everything that's happened here tonight. I certainly don't want it to happen to my property. I bought that property unaware of what the problem was. I've been there for a month, and I'm just kind of trying to go on my life. I'm recently retired, and I love Falmouth. So, again, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to explain that, and really, I don't want it to happen to my property either. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKeon. Mike, how long do you need? A month?
2
Or is that
2 weeks.
2 weeks? So they don't meet on the 2nd, so May 9th is the next available one. I mean, unless you can get everything into us by next week, but I think you have a little bit of work to do, at least on that deck part.
So you're meeting on the
We meet
2nd?
the 25th and then the 9th. There's
Oh.
no meeting on May 2nd.
Well, the 25th is only a week away.
Yeah.
So it'd have to be...
Oh, I'm sorry, I was thinking back a week, so it's
It'd have to be the
9th?
9th. It'd have to be the 9th, yep.
Sure.
At the request of the applicant, we will continue this to May 9th.
Second.
No other comments? I would like to make one comment. I'd like to welcome you into the community of Falmouth. I'm glad that you're here. Do not let anything that you may think is onerous be a weight on your shoulders. There's always a solution. This board is comprised of people that give to this community all the time. And whether you believe it or not, with open arms. And I think that the dialogue that's here is giving you guidance. And with that, and your engineer, I think your project has forward momentum. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? So moved.
Thank you.
I am now going to surrender my chairmanship. And welcome Betsy
What is
to the
that?
table. This is my gavel.
It's a dead blow hammer, so be
Don't make me
careful.
laugh.
Wouldn't ramp with that. That's all.
I guess you know.
We are
It's off the table.
called Jackie, Ed Corner, 194.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Paul Janke, 194 Edgewater Drive East Falmouth, for permission to replace two 10-inch existing pilings and to install two new 10-inch pilings. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'll save any of my comments until after Mr. Porcelli's presentation.
Madam Chair, I'm going to recuse myself.
Oh, okay. You surrendered and you're recusing yourself. Good evening, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
My name is Michael Porcelli from Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant, Mr. Paul Yankee, and he's the owner of the property located at 194 Edgewater Drive East. And this property received an order of conditions from this commission a couple of years ago to rebuild an existing dock. And he rebuilt the existing dock and has been using the dock. And at the time that we applied for the dock reconstruction, we made it clear that the owner had two boats, and the board allowed for the tying of two boats. The dock was rebuilt in the same alignment and same length. And after a couple of years of use, it has become clear that tying of the boats to the pier is difficult at best. Not the tying itself, but protecting the boats from harm is difficult at best, because the piles are spaced such that in an effort to minimize the number of piles that we installed, we made the spacing longer than, not longer than the boats, but longer than would typically be used, so that you can tie the boats to the dock and not have part of the boat get caught underneath the superstructure of the dock. So, depending on the wind conditions and the tide conditions, the Yankees have come down for the weekend and found their boat tucked up underneath, the tide hanging it up underneath. They've seen the boats banging against the dock. So, I've applied for permission to install 4 pilings, 2 on each side, so that they can more easily tie their boats, more safely tie their boats to the dock that was approved. Now, there's a little bit of confusion about this side, proposing a pile here, and here, and here, and here. These 2 pilings, there's a note on the plan that says 10-inch diameter timber pile to replace existing piles. There are 2 pilings right next to them, and they were actually installed by this owner for his dock, and he's been a good neighbor and allowed Yankee to tie to his pilings, but those pilings are starting to get rotted at the mud line. They're not really structurally sound, so the idea was to replace those pilings with these 2 new pilings and have both neighbors share them. But evidently, we learned this week when they were notified as an abutter, we learned it wasn't that simple and this abutter has a concern about losing grandfathering, if you will, of his pilings, and doesn't want to participate, I should say is a better word, in the project if his pilings are removed and then the new pilings are shared. So, although the plan says that, I'm saying tonight that the plan is actually to not touch those pilings. We're asking for 4 new pilings, and 2 of the 4 now will not replace those 2. And if it takes a continuance to change the note, I'm happy to do that. That's the project. Installation of the 4 pilings.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman. A couple of things when I went back and looked at the old permit of this dock. There was a lot of discussion because the applicant wanted to replace the dock that was there. It was pipe piled, I believe it was a pipe piled structure. It was old, and they needed to, or had a desire to replace the structure. My question is, at that time, why weren't, I mean, as a boat owner, was your client not aware of how big that structure was actually going to be and the limitations that they might have to tie the boats onto it? I mean, your client has 2 boats, correct?
Yeah, he's
Okay.
let me finish answering. He's sort of an inexperienced boater. Didn't anticipate the difficulty of keeping the boat stable tied to the dock. And frankly, at the time that we made that application, there was other projects under review where there was a lot of resistance by this commission to allow for the added pilings to be installed because there was a concern it would result in larger boats than the person owned being tied there, which isn't the case here. He simply lived with the dock for a couple seasons, had the frustration of not being able to keep the boat stable. He experienced some damage to the boat. He came down and saw his boat caught underneath, and all he wants to do now is have a better way to tie his boats.
And at the beginning, when this dock was permitted, you had originally proposed tie-off pilings. It's written in the notes.
Right.
And this board said that they considered that to be an extension of the structure that was there. I mean, it was a little teeny dock. I mean, you have a fairly substantial structure there now. And that in order to do that, you would need to meet all the new performance standards. You chose at that time to take those pilings off your proposed plan in order to get it through under the grandfathering provision and not requiring to meet the performance standards. So why would the board not require current performance standards to be met at this point?
Well, I don't remember it quite the same way. I remember we provided aerial photos to try to show the grandfathering, and if you remember, we discovered that some of the aerial photos showed that the dock had been lengthened through the years.
Yes, it had.
And we went back to a pre-78 photo and compared it to a couple of post-78 photos, 78 being the magic date for grandfathering, and discovered that, lo and behold, between 78 and sometime in the 90s, they made the dock bigger. So we were trying to get permission to rebuild the dock that was in its longer position at the time, and it became obvious that it wasn't grandfathered, so we reduced the length of the dock because that was the length that was grandfathered. And the pilings were discussed in the application as there was a perception that that was making the dock bigger, there was a potential for larger boats. So in an effort to get your permission to rebuild the dock, which was in poor condition at best, wobbly, unsafe, a decision was made to not make an issue of the tie-off pilings and try to use the dock just as a dock. And now we're coming back and saying that it would be nice to have the tie-off piles, because we're discovering that it's hard to keep the boat tied. It's as simple as that. We're not trying to do anything else than that. And I really don't believe that installing 4 pilings constitutes an expansion of the structure that would require you to meet all of today's performance standards. It just makes it so that the boats that use the dock now, and will continue to use the dock now, can be tied more safely and not get damaged.
Well, that's the discussion the board had during that hearing. I agree with you that there was a problem that this dock had increased in length, but the tie-off pilings were a discussion. In fact, Betsy made the statement. It's in this, so I've just asked the question. I don't have any other comments, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thanks. Maureen?
Am I the hearing officer?
Well, I don't know, I'm going off the notes that I see over here.
Oh, okay. One quick question, Mike. In your narrative, first I'd like to make sure we put the old record into this file.
Because I reference it, don't I?
Well, you actually, in your table of contents, you say attachment B, order of conditions for recently constructed pier, but it's not in here.
Right.
So we need that information.
Well, you have it. I didn't attach it, but it was already in your file. But I'm happy to give you more copies.
In what, in the main file?
Oh, he means it's in the file that you...
But if I
put
didn't
in.
just put that in, it wouldn't have been there, so we just need that.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Jen and I had this
Okay.
conversation today.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
hap-
That
I'm
would
happy-
be
All
the
right.
original order and the amended.
Yeah.
Because the amended allowed you to go from the 3 feet to the 4 feet.
Right.
Because that was another thing that this board, if you remember, you originally permitted the 3-foot dock, and the applicant was,
Wanted a 4-foot.
you wanted the 4-foot, and eventually filed an amendment, and you granted that 4-foot wide walkway.
And the other thing is that I didn't have the old file, which I didn't have time to come in and read the old file, and it was supposed to be in here. Need the soundings, do you know what they were, Jen, in the old, did we have soundings for the mooring field?
Ow.
And the reason is I'd like to know what they are now and what they were then, because usually we require soundings in the mooring field, unless I was absent that day.
Same soundings?
We didn't
Same soundings, okay.
We didn't resurvey it.
Okay.
So they're gonna be the same. We didn't do another sounding survey.
No, I want to know what they were when we permitted it, because if this is this pretty much the plan?
Yeah, they built it
Yeah.
exactly the way.
I
you
must have
permitted
been
it.
absent that night, because I don't see any depths in the mooring field except for
1.5, 1.7.
7. Yeah, usually we like to,
Well, they're
1.3
pre-existing,
here.
yeah, that's a pre-existing non-conforming.
yeah, exactly, and that's where I'm headed with this. We did, because this was an old existing dock and we were trying to improve the environment, I feel now it's, now we're adding on to it, and this would have gone back to meet our performance standards if it started to change dramatically. And so I'm concerned that, we really didn't do much to protect the environment. When I look at it now with 2 boats, if they back in and they're in, who knows what, I don't even know what the water depth is. I mean, if they pull in bow first, that's probably fine, but there's only 2 feet on the back of, or 1.7. And to get a barge in there to even put these pilings in, you're only at 1.7 feet of water and 1.1. And you just said that the barges are, 16 to 18 inches that they draw. So I don't even know how you're going to get them in.
Well, I could answer that. The barge wouldn't be staged where the pilings are being driven. The barge would be staged out here where it says 3 feet of water, and then he would reach and drive the pilings in.
Mike? See it? He takes his crane and he hangs this dangling piling out there? Is that how he does it?
Yeah, it's a vibratory hammer on a crane, and they vibratory hammer the pilings in from the boom of the crane. The crane has a boom, it has a reach, and it reaches over. It doesn't have to be right over the piling.
Anything?
That's all? Nope.
Mike?
No questions?
Ted?
No question.
Mary?
I'm just assuming that, well, I shouldn't assume. I'll ask Jen from the previous notice. The reason they didn't go out to depth, the required depth, is the dock would have been too long.
No,
It's a
I don't
pre-existing.
believe they wanted to deal with the shellfish survey, and I don't mean to say it like that. Basically, you allowed this, the original license structure to be rebuilt. This doesn't look anything like the original license structure. It was pipe pilings, floats, I believe it was floats, right, Mike?
No, it was all pipe-supported
Floats,
decking, no
yeah.
floats, no floats.
Okay, decking. It's pretty rickety.
Right.
So you allowed this, and they chose not to go into deeper water because that would have triggered the performance standards, which would have included shellfish. And I'm
Right.
not sure if a shellfish survey was ever done to look at that. I don't know. I think it was just simpler at the time for the applicant to try to get at least the footprint that the original dock was in re-permitted to a more substantial structure.
How much longer had the dock? The freaking bird.
How much longer would have been?
Permitted portion, how much more was that?
I can answer that. I recall that what we were trying to get
14.
permitted was a dock that was probably another 15 or 20 feet long, and to just follow up on, that part of the reason was if you make the dock longer, you now have a whole bunch of other performance standards. So, and we were presenting this at a time where you had very recently on Acapesket Road, project name not to be mentioned, denied a dock who wanted to extend the length, put it in deeper water, and you denied it. Fool us
Was it
once, shame
100
on
feet?
us,
Was
fool
that
us
the
twice. It wouldn't have been approved. We were fearful you wouldn't approve it, so we
Because of the
abandoned because of the potential for there being significant shellfish and the dock being now a new dock, even though it was in deeper water, and you have denied those. So we were concerned that it would be denied. We thought we might look at it again in the future, but he hasn't done that. So there's a significant cost to doing the shellfish survey. They average $3,500 to $4,000. And then to spend that money to find out you have significant shellfish, if we found out we had significant shellfish, there was a high likelihood you would have denied a longer dock.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Arthur?
No questions, thank you.
Ed?
Yes. Well, I would just encourage continued consideration of the longer dock. I have always favored longer docks that get us out to at least 3 feet of water, and that would be consistent with my previous position on this dock and others that you've referred to. But let me ask some questions. A couple of times here, we've been talking about the crane used for installation. Can you find out for us, please, what exactly is the reach in number of feet of the crane from the landward edge of the barge? I think we ought to get some factual information on just what that reach might be, so we're not all guessing here. And finally, I would suggest to you that there's another solution to prevent the boat from slipping onto the dock. And I am not a novice boater like your client here. And in many areas, I've seen what you might put here between the last two pilings out extending. You might put some kind of a 2x12 in there with a rubber bumper on it, and that prevents the dock from slipping under prevents the boat from slipping under the dock. And it has the same kind of bumper material as currently exists on the pilings that you've got there. So I would suggest that's an alternate to solve the problem and avoid all the issues here of the pilings, and I think that's probably a minor change that doesn't need any review, or it might be an administrative review at best. Those are my comments.
Thanks, Ed. Court?
You mean like put another, like a stringer?
Yeah, stringer.
Okay. Huh. idea, Ed.
And pad it, you know.
Yeah, it's a very good idea.
Mike, you were concerned that in the original application, that putting pilings out there, I understand, would have gave you concern that that would open up a can of worms from a permitting standpoint?
Yes, and we didn't have any evidence that, I couldn't at that time tell you that the owners were having difficulty tying their docks. They're both
So I guess
docks.
my follow-on question is, why is 2012 any different?
Because the property owner now has used the dock for a couple of years and discovered that it's difficult to keep the boat stable at the dock without it banging against the dock. If you had tie-offs and you could tie lines to the tie-off pilings, you could keep the boat in a relatively settled position, not contacting from waves to the dock. And also you could prevent it from turning and getting the gunnel caught underneath, because the boat can't stay between the two pilings. So he discovered through experience
But the question is, does this open a whole range of permitting issues that need to be addressed, such as shellfish surveys and all that, and then the minimum depth and, all of the things that you were concerned about? I mean, I understand that he's used the thing and his boats get stuck under the dock, and
No, I think
perhaps there's an alternate solution, such as Ed suggested.
I think lengthening of the dock would have opened up all those requirements, but I
mean, in my own mind, I'm not sure what's changed and why it's something we should approve now.
Well, the only thing that's changed is what I keep saying, is that the owner is discovering difficulty tying the boat, and I don't see a place in your regulations that would prohibit the installation of 4 pilings. Maybe you could point that out to me, but I don't see it in your regulations. I've applied to you, asking your consideration to allow my client to not have to deal with boat damage. You've approved tie-off pilings on other docks.
I don't have any other questions.
Okay, I'm going to go next, and if this were my dock, I'd put out a spring line for the boats, and that would hold it off. And I've seen that work in quite, relatively high-energy systems.
Mhm.
And whether the board considers this an extension of the dock is something that we can talk about in deliberation. I mean, we understand your position, and we have to discuss it among ourselves. Ed, do you have another question?
Yeah, I just want to comment that, you're asking us to be, give a little there. I think I just would like to say that I do have a big problem with this whole project, and that's the very shallow water. I did notice the boat parked in the driveway of the house. It's not especially large, and it probably draws about 18 inches maybe. I didn't measure it, just with my arm. But then you got a pretty big engine on the back of the thing, and that goes down quite a bit more. So there's probably some scouring taking place here. And I sure would like to see that dock get out, the whole thing get out into deeper water.
Well, that's not on the table tonight.
Right, well,
So
it could be,
let's
though.
just-
If the commission were to tell me they'd approve a dock that's 20 to 30 feet longer, I would apply tomorrow, but I don't think that's going to be
If
the
it
case.
We just have to do the shellfish survey, unless you
I know,
have reason to believe it wouldn't be successful.
I would be concerned. I don't know that answer, and it's expensive to find out.
Maury.
Quick question, Mike, how big is the boat, the 2 boats that are there?
I think they're in the 22-foot range. I haven't been there for a
There's
while.
one there, the other one wasn't.
Yeah, it's like a 22
All right, so if the
footer.
22-foot, the 2 pilings that are existing are 16-foot on center.
Yeah.
So,
What happens is the boat gets cockeyed because you can only tie it in 2 places, and the boat gets tucked underneath. If the winds shift a certain direction and then the tide rises, then all of a sudden the boat's caught underneath the dock.
well, if you put 2 stern lines and 2 bow lines, it doesn't do that. anyway. Maybe there should be an educational process before. I mean, I don't want to sound mean,
Well, you know-
but if, I could see if they had like a 12-foot boat, that it would get underneath the 16-foot, the two pilings. But even if they moved it up, the piling could be right at midship, and it can't go underneath the dock.
Well, we could talk about that all night, but my client had an interest. It's very common to have tie-off pilings. We're talking about
And we already discussed
we're
it.
talking about like 2 square feet of bottom area,
But we discussed it when we first
Right.
permitted this, and that's,
and we know something new now.
I think we probably have enough information, although I would like the answer to your question also.
But if that's the only question, that's probably not,
But what I think we could do is close
Necessary
it,
to-
and if
yeah.
this is a permitted project, then
That
that question would
information
have
can
to
be
be,
provided to you.
we can get that information separately.
well, it would have to be, and it would have to meet certain requirements. In other words, if it were less than X amount.
Okay.
why doesn't
Yeah.
he submit it to me next week? I
No,
hate
we
closing, and
So then, is it appropriate for
You
me
either
to,
close this hearing, and if you want that information and you issue a decision that you can get that information in, that's fine. Other than that, you keep this record open, and you continue this hearing.
I would like to keep the
You want to
record-
continue it for 1 week, that's
Yeah,
fine.
that's
I mean,
fine.
that's not
Yeah.
enough, I mean, that's not a lot of stuff you have to review. It's like the reach of a crane.
Right, and not only that, but none of us have read the old file that we've entered into the record from the old dock permitting, so I would like to read that, and
So Mike, would you like a continuance to
Yeah,
next week?
I'm happy to ask for a continuance for a week, yes. I did have a question, I can't seem to get an answer. I don't know of a section of your regs that would prohibit driving of 4 pilings.
It's all of our regs, you have to overcome the presumption that the activity will not damage the resource.
And
We understand what your argument is. We'll discuss it as to whether we feel it would be a damage
so
to the
there's not
resource.
a section that says anything about driving of pilings. I mean, we drive pilings for new docks all the time.
Right, we know that.
Okay.
But it's an activity within the wetland resources
Mhm.
that presumably causes damage unless you can overcome the presumptions.
and this is not a new dock, it's a replacement of an existing dock. That's the approach you chose to take.
Sure.
Mike, when you get the reach of the crane, could you get a couple, I know a lot of the marine contractors have different barges and cranes. Could you get a couple of different
Mhm.
reaches and cranes
Sure.
lengths for us, so we're not stuck with one company, and then unfortunately, that might tie your client into using that one particular company, and I don't want to do that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, Maury,
I make a motion to, that people on top.
but I'm going to make a
I
motion.
make a motion to continue this until April 25th.
No, I'm not going to take questions until we have a motion on the table. Thank you. Can we have a second?
Second.
Okay, now, I know, I just wanted a motion on the
Okay.
table. Okay. Yes, are there questions from the audience? Would you please come up? Or, yeah, you'll have to come a little closer because you have to, okay, because you have to speak into the microphone. I was going to have Mike bring the microphone to you, but I don't think it'll go that far.
I think it will.
Will it?
I think so.
She's got it.
I'm Verla O'Hara, and in dealing with the original schedule for this meeting, they're my two outstanding posts that were going to be removed without anyone ever even telling me about it. I received one notice from Falmouth Engineering saying that they were going to put in four new pilings. Then last Thursday, I got a notice that said they were going to put in 2 new pilings and replace 2 pilings. And the markers are now out there, right side of my pilings, that they were going to take out without ever consulting me. What I want to know is, has it been established they're not going to touch my pilings? Because they are registered in the Barnstable County of Deeds as part of my dock.
Yes,
ma'am.
it has been.
Okay,
They've
secondly,
taken that part out, and
Okay.
Mike will give us a new plan for next week, which will remove that note.
secondly, I'd like to ask where, if he's going to put the posts in, where are they going to put them in? Are they not, where they're marked, if they put them in, they're going to really disturb my pilings if they put them in right there, right up tight against mine. And I would suggest that maybe they stagger them a little bit away from mine so that they're not disrupting mine when they do it, if they do it. Okay?
Okay, well, Mike's going to give us a new plan for next week.
All right.
And he can consider that. We'll see what we get.
Thank you.
But thank you for giving us your concerns. Any other questions from the audience? Any more questions from here? Ed?
Yeah, if it's a question, well, I'll make it a question for Mr. Boselli. The proposed 10-inch diameter piles that will no longer be replacing, but they're on the north side of the pier here. How far are they from the property line?
They're proposed to be 3 feet from the property line.
Okay, thank you. That's what we need.
Okay. Okay, are there any other questions on the board? Any other questions from the audience? I'm not going to let you have a final word on this one, Mike. Motion on the table is to close this hearing and take it under advisement. All in favor, say aye.
We didn't close it.
Motion on the floor is to continue this hearing until next week. Thank you, I'm glad everybody's awake. Probably more awake than I am since I
You try to catch that.
started at 5 in the morning. Okay, motion on the table is to continue to next week. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. I am so impressed that everybody's so wide awake. Thank you, Mike. David and Kim Capobianco, 316 Edgewater Drive East, East Falmouth, for permission to replace the existing concrete seawall with vinyl sheeting, replace concrete stairway with timber stairs over the revetment, and associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I will save any of my comments until after Mr. O'Day's presentation.
Mr. O'Day?
Thank you.
Mr.
Good
O'Day,
evening.
welcome.
John O'Day from Sullivan Engineering, representing the Capobiancos. Mr. Capobianco is in the audience tonight. This property is located at 316 Edgewater Drive in East Falmouth in Seacoast Shores. It overlooks Eel Pond to its east. The wetland resources found at or near the site are land under ocean, coastal beach, coastal bank, which is the existing seawall system, land subject to coastal storm flowage, and there's a salt marsh on the abutting property to the south. The house that is on the existing parcel was constructed around 1952. The existing seawall system, there's two portions to it. The landward portion is a concrete wall. Seaward of that is a stone revetment. The concrete wall appears to date around the time of the dwelling of 1952. And the stone revetment appears to also be around that time or shortly thereafter. The existing concrete wall is being undermined and beginning to show signs of failure. If you had a chance to visit the site, and if not, some photos were included in the notice. Appears to be washing out from underneath, which is causing the top to tip outwards. The project as proposed is to repair this wall system by replacing the concrete with a vinyl sheeting in that same location. Also proposed is to remove an existing concrete stairway that's set within the existing wall and replace that with timber stairs over the stone revetment. Detailed construction methodology was included within the notice, and just to highlight a few of the things that are within that. The construction would be performed from the land. There would be construction access down the existing paved driveway to the rear yard, which is an open area. We have called for a limit of hay bales with silt fencing. That is not so much to be a work limit, but to be a silt prevention line. with any materials and excavated materials being stored landward of it. We've called for a construction trench to be dug along the inside of the existing concrete wall. And the reasoning behind that would be so that when the concrete itself is removed, there's no failure of the land behind it. And we called for that trench to be pitched away from the resource so that if there is any runoff or rain during the few days when the site might be open, that would not head towards the water. If it's required, any of the stones along the top of the revetment would be relocated, again, landward of that siltation line. The concrete would be cut and removed from the site. And vinyl sheeting would be driven within that footprint of what was the concrete wall. There would be weep holes drilled within the wall to prevent any backup behind it. The construction trench would be wrapped in filter fabric and backfilled. There are timber tieback piles which are required structurally to hold up this height of a wall. And then any stones would be reset and the area could be finished backfilling, regraded, reloomed, seeded, and then they could handle any of the timber work which would be on the seaward side of that, and that would all just be handwork. We did consider a few construction alternatives. One original concept would be to just do a tieback system that can sometimes extend the life of an existing concrete wall to straighten it back out. In this case, a portion of the concrete wall, at least to the north of the stairs, appears to have been poured in two sections, and to try to straighten that out would probably have cracked it, and so that wouldn't have worked in that section. And another portion of the wall is a concrete block wall, and again, trying to straighten that and tie it back wouldn't have worked. We also considered driving the vinyl in front of the existing concrete wall. Because the wall's tipped, we had a concern about the space that would be between the two walls. Would there be additional forces from whatever backfill was placed in there, expanding and contracting, and would it continue to try to move? Plus, we still would have required the tiebacks and drilling through the concrete wall. It wouldn't have reduced any of the disturbances behind it. We also considered some materials alternatives such as timber. We think it might have had a slightly shorter lifespan and a similar cost. We also considered steel, but that was kind of cost prohibitive. I think I'd be happy to answer any questions about the site of the project.
Okay, thanks. Jen?
No, Madam Chairman.
No question.
I've discussed the various options with Mr. O'Day, actually out in the field of his last project that he was reviewing. I'm comfortable with what was submitted.
Okay. Dan, thanks for going through those alternatives. That's always, otherwise we might have brought them up one by one.
Yeah, save some time.
Ed?
Well, what has just been presented to us is, I have no problems with it. It sounds appropriate. I do have a question about something on the plan. It says slate patio. Yeah, I believe what's described as slate patio actually is a concrete patio, unless you poured concrete over the slate, but it looks like a concrete patio there. And I'm just wondering if that was ever permitted. I'll save more of the trouble of asking that question. Now, you might not have the answer, but you should.
We can certainly look into that. I know that in reviewing the walls, the aerials, I have seen it, the exact date it went back to, we can provide that.
Okay. Because I wouldn't mind seeing that, I'm not sure that we can require it, but I wouldn't mind seeing that concrete. It's in terrible shape anyway. I wouldn't mind seeing it disappear. That's all.
No questions.
No questions.
Tom?
No questions.
Mary?
No questions.
Ted?
I just wondered how you're going to do the vinyl sheeting when you have the construction trench in front. How does the machine get close enough to drive it?
We're getting into that crane reach, but I envision this being done with an excavator, so the boom could reach out that 4 feet very easily.
All right. Thought they had to be closer.
I think that it would be,
Because we went out and saw one being done a couple of years ago, right? And
Out
I thought
by,
they'd be pretty
Clinton?
much on
The one on
top of
Clinton?
it.
They were right on top of it, weren't they?
They
Yeah.
used a
You're gonna
small
have to be
machine.
right on top of that wall.
Pardon me?
You're gonna have to be right on top. Well, that one was, but I mean, depends what the reach is, what kind of machine they're using.
I guess that the trench could be widened. We had called that out as a minimum dimensions. If a contractor couldn't reach and needed to create an additional area there to work from behind it, but we think it's important to have some area dug out behind it so that we don't flow over.
Okay, so
Okay, thanks. Mike?
When you demo that existing wall, I'm afraid that riprap's going to move in on you. So you're concerned that you have to move it in place to get this done. I believe that's real. And with that said, you're going to have to move some of those blocks, and you'd like to see that done at least at low tide or lower tide, so you're not pushing things around, because you have no protection, salt water, outlet.
I think that even the high tide just kind of fringed those bottom rocks. So I think that they wouldn't want to be doing any work at an extreme high tide or anything, but I think a good part of the day that area should be dry.
I think that's right, but I think what you're proposing can be done. I'm just looking at suggesting some suggestions that you might see that we're doing. Two, you have at least, you get like 4 shrubs around that patio. I suspect they're going to disappear when you're moving equipment back and forth there with the dirt. Any intention of maybe replacing them?
Actually, in staking this out, I think we had missed those shrubs, so it wasn't the intention to remove them. If there were to be some construction damage, I think that they could be replaced in a similar configuration, but it wasn't the intention to remove them as part of this.
North end of that riprap. I'd have to refer to Ted, but I believe there's a Rosa or a Goza that's staying there.
It's on top of the stones, yes, it's something that we've also discussed, and that is a plant that probably would need to be, or would be disrupted during this construction, but I think it could be placed back. They're pretty rugged vegetation, so I think it could survive even if it needed to be temporarily relocated on land for an hour and put back.
That's fine, I think I'm done.
Okay. I'm going to give it to Maury, but I'm just going to make a comment. I think with 60 years of having no buffer here, hasn't helped with water sheeting from landward and then moving up from high tide with that. If your clients were inclined to put some buffer in, I think that would help things down the line for a number of reasons. Maury?
And is this a licensed revetment?
No.
Are you going to license this?
A license will be required at some point in order for that to stay. We have talked to the state about whether or not that's a requirement in order to do this repair work, and we were told no, especially because the work that we would be doing would be above that high watermark. So it's the stones, some of the bottom stones would need future licensing.
How about the stairway?
Yeah. Only because then you'd need public
Stairway.
lateral access, that's all. So I just want to make sure that when this gets done, that it's incorporated in, so when they go to license it, that's going to be a requirement of Chapter 91.
Well, the access would be required between mean low and mean high, and we certainly wouldn't be blocking that at all. So I don't see
Yeah.
access stairs
Okay.
as being an issue.
I guess I just haven't seen us permit work on something that's not a licensed structure, that's all. I don't, maybe we have, I
It's
just,
been in the areas for years. We've
Yeah.
already-
Oh, I am
yeah,
not doubting
we've
it's there.
absolutely looked, we've talked to them
Okay.
about licensing it.
Okay.
I'm just glad to see that the vinyl shading's going behind the existing
Exactly,
wall, not in
exactly,
front of
yeah.
it.
yeah, I mean, it's a
Well,
good
that
project what you're
wouldn't work.
doing. And I would
This
have
board has
to,
permitted it before.
I would have to concur with Betsy, that I really think it would be prudent on this project to see a buffer after the project is, the sheathing is installed, to protect the resources from sheeting off and, runoff from the lawn. I mean, the fertilizer and everything else, it would be, I mean, it doesn't have to be a huge, 25-foot wide, but definitely, 2 or 3, maybe a 4-foot wide buffer across the top of that wall after this disturbance. And, with native plantings so that it will protect, and I don't know if there's shellfish, it just says land under the ocean, so, again, it would be very helpful to have some kind of plantings there. Other than that, I had no other questions, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions here? What would you like to do? Would you like to take some of our suggestions, or would you like to?
I think that the shrubs is certainly something that the clients hear and has listened to and may understand the concerns of the embayments. And, if at some point that they would want to, do their part, but if it's not a requirement, I wouldn't want to specifically tie it to this project.
Okay. I understand that, and that's not before us.
And, but it's certainly been noted. And I think that there was only a few minor
Yeah, the other
comments
things
that-
about the plants can be put in the
Absolutely, the
conditions.
plants, and if there was any language about, being careful of certain high tides. We had
We can
no
put that
issues
in
with
as
those
conditions.
kinds. Yes.
Well, I was out there at dead low today, and the water was up to the concrete landing. And I know it was low tide in that area, because it's specifically while I went out, not for your project, for a different project out on Edgewater Drive East, so. It was low tide and the water was at the concrete landing.
And I would like to note on your photographs, you already have sea lettuce, I mean, there's degradation in the water there, so if you're a landowner, it's really important, the fertilizer, the lawn's beautiful green, and I know it's not tied into this, but it's for your own benefit if everybody does that your property values will decrease when you start to get noxious smells from decaying, vegetation along the waterfront. And this originally, if you look at old aerials, was salt mine all the way across. And back before, it was removed, before there was the Wetlands Protection Act, and that used to scrub and protect the water quality. And now we don't have that. It's gone. We've replaced it with a turf lawn. So hopefully you'll do it for your own benefit, not just for the environment's benefit.
So this is for the packet?
Mhm.
So when did you take these?
Within the year.
But not necessarily within this year. But did you say the oldest?
Not
year?
2012, maybe 2011.
No, there's no sea lettuce in there.
Well, it's going to be there pretty soon.
Oh, it's going to be there soon.
Tell you that.
Oh, I know.
Okay. Ed, one more question?
Did you just say something about sea lettuce? Because I think I
Saw
noticed.
some?
Huh?
Did you see some?
I noticed that, and it seemed to be only on this property. I couldn't figure it. I actually
Did you see it
went
today?
down the street and I saw an area was clear. And I'm just wondering, does this thing have an old cesspool in there or something? Is this an area where there's a lot of nitrogen just leaching in this area from a
Or it could be sort of,
real
I haven't been out there, but it could
non-performing?
be sort of a dead spot that it
I
was.
was going to say, we do have a groin right along our
Yeah,
northerly
so
line
it
that's
could, it just
traffic being
accumulates
coming
there.
out.
It just seemed, actually, I was surprised to see it, so
Yeah,
we've had warm weather,
Probably
but
didn't
very early in the season to have
necessarily
a...
all start there. Some of
Yeah.
it got loose and then came in.
It's very
and
early
then
in the
landed
season to
there.
be seeing this stuff. I can't imagine what it's going to be like in the summertime.
Yeah. Okay. Ed, would you like to make a motion?
Make a motion to close this hearing, I think, and take it under advisement.
Second.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Any questions from the audience? No? Okay. Let's try again. Motion on the table is to close this hearing and take it under advisement. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Maury will take those. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Continued requests for hearing under a notice of intent. Peter and Mary Beth Walsh, 115 T-Ticket Path, East Falmouth, for permission to construct and maintain additions and decks, to remove existing retaining walls, patio entries, and steps, and to install new and modified of the same landscape features, gutters with dry wells, native mitigation plantings, and the associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'll save any of my comments or questions till after Mr. Costa's presentation.
Good evening, Matt.
Good evening. Thank you. For the record, Matt Costa, Christopher Costa Associates, representing the applicant. Property is located at 115 T-Ticket Path. It's a rather unique dwelling that we have on this property. It's long and narrow. The applicant is proposing several small additions to the property, and along with that is a new patio. I'm just going to take you around the dwelling, point out the proposed additions. Out front, we have two stoops, entryways that are going to be, one's going to be replaced. Another one's going to be added and the old entryway replaced. There's going to be a deck added on to the end of the dwelling. There's going to be a little addition added to this corner area with a little deck added on here. There's going to be a small deck added off this area here that will be cantilevered. It's over two existing retaining walls that are approximately 5 feet in height. This area, and you can look at the blow up because we had a lot of little detail going on and things on top of other things. I did a little blow up showing the proposed additions. But we have also from the existing conditions blow up, you can see exactly what's there right now. We have an existing patio here that is going to be enclosed with an addition, and then we're going to propose a new patio next to it. We're also proposing two new retaining walls, and we're going to remove the existing retaining walls. We're going to do a little bit of regrading in this area, and we're going to ring the existing 24-inch oak there to save that tree. The resource areas are out front. There's a salt marsh, and we got the Zone A shown on the plan for the salt marsh, and there's a top of coastal bank on here also, and that runs along the elevation 12 contour. We've done the mitigation calculations based on the new impervious areas within the Zone A and Zone B, according to your regulations. This is in your resource area notes. It's all broken down. Shows you what's existing now and what's being proposed, and we arrive at a certain square footage plantings. The site is, if you've been to it, it's got a naturalist feel to it. There's not a lot of landscaping. It's not highly manicured or anything like that. In fact, this whole portion of the site is more or less naturally vegetated. So we didn't have a whole lot of options for our mitigation plantings. However, what we have done is propose those mitigation plantings on the area that is coastal bank that has lawn. So we're removing the lawn in that area. We also have a note, call your attention to this area over here. We took a good look at this area, and it has a real diminished understory that's right on the bank, and it is prone to erosion. There's really, you just look at it and there's pine needles and dirt. So we're proposing that for the balance of our mitigation, which equates to 230 square feet, that we work with the commission staff, and we put notes on that accordingly, that the staff is to be consulted prior to installation of these so we can maximize the effect of their placement. And disperse those throughout this area on the bank to help stabilize the bank and supplement that deficient understory. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Matt. Jen?
No questions.
Courtney?
No question.
Ed?
No questions, but just a request. I
you-
saw
you-
stuff here about retaining walls, and I'm looking at the big solid lines, and my first impression was that was meant to be a retaining wall, and I kept looking, and of course I saw the staking was different, and I realized that's your limit of work. So next time, could you just sort of label that a little bit better so I can find it without
Sure,
a lot of
I
digging?
see you have the hatched colored plan, which didn't copy well. We actually supplied you with a new revised plan. So
Yes.
the hatching was a little too powerful when it copied black and white. So the revised plan that you have dated 4/11/12, I think is a little easier to read.
I guess I have an earlier version.
You should all be looking at a plan dated April 11th.
Mine says January 10th. All right, maybe there's
You
another
got
one
the
in my mail
revised
somewhere?
plan. You got it there. Got it last week.
See, the hatching looks
What do
good
you
when
know,
it's
is
in
this
color,
Is that it?
not black and
I
white.
guess.
Okay.
He found it.
Arthur?
No questions, thank you.
Tom?
No questions.
Maureen?
Are you going to make sure that the roof runoff is captured?
Oh, thank you for pointing that out. We have dry well spec'd on here.
Okay.
You can see the dry well detail. So yes.
Thank you.
Mike?
No question.
Ed?
I know what you mean, though. I didn't see.
I'm not sure, was it the last, I don't have the plan in front of me, but was the last plan, did they have retaining walls around that curved patio?
Yeah.
Or do you have it now?
This, right
Yeah.
here? Yeah, yeah.
You still have them, the
The-
retaining wall?
That's been the original proposal.
Okay. I just wondered, it's not really necessary, you can do it with grade. I'm just wondering why.
This is pretty steep.
I know.
They're trying to get that.
But I mean, I looked at it, where it was, they think you'd actually need it. with
Well,
existing-
you know, it meets all the performance standards, and we think it's gonna be necessary, so we'd rather
Right.
have it, not need it, than to need it and have to come back.
Okay, that's it.
Mary?
No questions.
Well, it sounded like there weren't too many questions. Somebody want to put a motion on the
I
table?
make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
Any further questions? Any questions from the audience? Okay, all in favor of the motion on the table, which is to close this hearing and take it under advisement, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.
Madam Chairman, the vote orders of conditions are for next week, unless you want to have discussion on any one of them. What I would ask you to do is if you do want to have a discussion on any one of those, you table that until after your other business of a discussion of a certificate of compliance for Old Dock Road.
Okay, well, I don't know whether there will, but let's just have a generic table
Table?
of the order of conditions. Could I have
I
that?
make a motion to table the order of conditions.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. So we'll move on to other business, 145 Old Dock Road, discussion of certificate of compliance.
Yes, Madam Chairman, this is under other business. The applicant had requested a hearing. It was not placed on your public hearing schedule. I can talk to you about that tomorrow, but I consulted with town council, and her suggestion was to go forward with this under a public meeting, which I would address the board, and the board wouldn't take any public comment. You can make your decision. We need to issue a decision by next week. And depending on that decision, if the applicant is not happy, they do have, under your regulations, 10 days to request a hearing from you, which we could schedule on May 9th. So to begin the certificate of compliance discussion, we did receive a request for a certificate of compliance for 145 Old Dock Road, and quite frankly, the staff was uncomfortable granting compliance on this property because of the commission's prior concerns with the stone wall. That was relayed to the applicant, that Mark and I just could not issue compliance on this, and that the compliance was going to take a vote of this board to grant it as the property currently stands. The applicant did provide you some information. You all received it. It came in on April 4th. I hope you've had a chance to read it for tonight. Those are my only comments. They did provide some documentation regarding the wall, which I think was the biggest concern of this board. Other than that, the property is pretty much in compliance. It was just the outstanding issue of the stone wall.
Okay.
So I need a decision by the board tonight on whether or not you would like to grant compliance.
Okay, so the options are, well, there isn't an option.
Well,
We're
the
going to
board
take a
can
vote
either
tonight.
grant compliance
Or not grant
or
compliance.
not grant compliance. Those that, whatever decision would go out by the 25th.
Right.
And if the applicant is satisfied, end of discussion. If the applicant is unsatisfied, they do, under your regulations.
Right, have a right for a public hearing.
Have the right for a public hearing, which we'll schedule for May 9th.
Okay.
At their request.
Okay, but I just wanted to
of course.
clarify, so everybody understands that, so my understanding from you is there's no testimony?
No.
It's just a discussion of the board?
Yep, it's a public meeting.
And then we take a vote? Okay, so I'll open it up for discussion.
If I may?
Yes.
Can we get some clarification of the issue on the stone
Please.
wall?
Okay,
Because
the
I'm not
stone
remembering.
wall, you issued an order of conditions for an addition to the house. When that addition was being built, or after that addition was done, we got a call that Gary Tavares was reconstructing the stone wall, which was not authorized under your order of conditions for the property. We stopped them, but pretty much the wall had been completely built at that point in time. So basically, the board needs to make a determination on whether, if it's the repair of an existing stone wall, I don't have that much of a concern with the work that they did, but if it was an enlargement of the wall, or the wall was never properly permitted, or, this board thinks it was an extension of the existing wall, then that's an issue. And we would have to go back and have that permitted properly if the board would allow it to be permitted or removed. There was testimony, written documentation and written testimony that the wall had existed prior to the reconstruction. We can see it in the 2003 plan. Prior to that, it shows up in aerials. But as far as whether or not the existing wall is any larger in a footprint than the old wall, I can't tell you for certain. It's a determination this board's going to have to make. Maury, I think the file's right in front of you.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
it's right there.
I have one question, Jen. So do we have any record of the, prior to the wall being reworked?
The only thing that we could find on the property prior to that, that filing with the addition to everything, is an order of conditions that was issued in '92 for a dock, but in there, I found these photos that were dated '93. It shows a wall, a portion of the wall, but it doesn't show the extended part, but I can pass those down.
So
Pretty much looks the
there,
same.
I know there was no wall there prior to
And it doesn't show
before
up in
the
the
present
plan
owners.
for this,
Yeah.
but that's because it was the dog and they just kind of looked the
Yeah.
house down on it.
Because when Dr. Dewan owned it, there was no wall there. And there was at one point an issue when it was erected. And I don't know if it was ever erected with a permit, but when it was constructed, that it was in the town road layout. And I remember that when I was on the Conservation Commission back then, that there was an issue with that. So I know the wall, the entire wall is in the V zone, and a portion of the wall is in the town road layout. And when they redid this wall, they removed a cedar tree on town property and replanted it with a pear tree, which is now currently there. If it was a permitted wall and they just reconstructed it in place, it's totally different than what was there. Just so everybody knows, it was a dry-laid stone wall. You can see in the photographs, small, what I call, little, like cobble, exactly. And then they brought in all cut granite and hewed, and they did a beautiful job. They cut it all to make it fit and it's all mortared. There's a footing, there's mortar in between all the joints. The old wall was just dirt, and actually that was part of its failure because the roots of the trees that they planted kept pushing out and pushing the wall out, and they've repaired it over the years off and on from the root structure pushing the wall out. I'm sure it's still gonna happen on the roadside because that's still very indicative of what was on the inside wall. And now the inside wall is very substantial and secure and mortared. Again, if there's permits to show it was a legal wall, because it was during the Wetlands Protection Act, it was 20 years ago, or whatever, I don't know the exact date when Dr. Dewan sold the property, but there was no wall there. There was just natural vegetation there. And it was never a raised bed with plantings on it. So if it was permitted and they just reworked it, I think the board would have to, figure out a mortared wall, all cemented, versus an open drainage type wall in a V zone. That's, I think, the big issue. And they did come in front of us and ask us to do it, and we denied them from doing it when they came in front of us for their permit to redo the house renovation. And that was something they requested, and we did not allow it to be redone, and then it got redone. So, that's just my comment. And I just think that the pear tree, I think the cedar tree should be replaced that was cut down, and a Bradford pear or whatever kind of fruit tree it is in the town road layout would be another compliance issue, but other than that. And I think there's irrigation too, but I think there was irrigation there.
When we started,
Did you? I didn't see.
then they have to go back.
Yeah. That's just my comment.
This is how long ago?
That's 93. Turn over the back. Look at the back.
Oh, we don't see the street side, though.
No, that's what the street side looks like.
I remember that was, 20 years ago. I remember that being done.
Yeah, and I think it was either Bob Inman
Bob
or,
Inman.
I think Bob Inman did it.
Yep. Town should be getting a permit for it. It's on town land.
Yeah, it's in
The
town
town
road
would make
layout.
them rip it out.
Don't go get that.
Any other comments?
Got me.
Does this board want to issue compliance on the property or not?
I would just like to have proof of the wall. If there's proof that that wall was a permanent wall, I really don't have any, I understand that you can rebuild it in its existing
The
footprint.
applicant was aware that the wall was pretty much the sticking point in compliance. They've submitted their written submittal to you regarding the wall, and that's the information they provided you. As I said, you can make a determination tonight, and they will have with 10 days from the issuance of your decision to request a hearing before the board. So if you feel that strongly more, you could deny compliance and then at a hearing stage request that they provide more information regarding the wall. That's the way I would, if that's the information you're looking for and you think there's more evidence out there on the wall, then that is what I would suggest you do to give you a certain comfort level. And if you want the pear versus the cedar versus the pear, because it's in the road layout, obviously we have to talk to Peter.
Well, they should have talked to Peter before they cut a cedar tree down the town road layout and put a pear tree in. And I did try to stop them from doing that.
You know what? There are a lot of, or were a lot of issues on this property. No one is questioning that.
Yeah.
This property was just a unfortunate, it took up too much of staff's time, let's just put it that way. So, but
Okay,
most of the issues are set now.
I'm going to suggest we have a vote. I'm going to recuse myself from this because I haven't even looked at any of the materials that came in.
Okay.
Which means that Maury and Arthur are on the quorum. And Mike, you won't be on the quorum for this one, right? Because this is a legal vote, so it's 7. Yes, you're
You're
on
a
it.
full commissioner, Courtney, last time I checked.
Yeah, I'm not going to vote just because I haven't looked at any of this. I can't look at this packet in this amount of time.
And do realize that, this is a tentative decision, you don't have a hearing. So, as I said, if the applicant is satisfied, we probably won't hear from them again. If the applicant is unsatisfied with the board's decision, they do have the opportunity to address you at a public hearing in which they can provide you the information that you're looking for, if you feel that you still need outstanding information.
Okay, what I'm going to suggest is, we can continue the discussion, but somebody put a positive motion on the table that it's granted. Okay, that's the motion that'll be put on.
Put a motion on the table to grant compliance.
Second.
Okay, and now we will finish up any discussion that people might want to have. So everybody understands the options, right? If you grant compliance, they get compliance. If it's denied tonight,
They have the
option to appeal,
address you.
and then we'll have a hearing.
It's not an appeal, it's
No,
just to request a
To
hearing.
request a hearing.
And
Because
bring
you're-
us the information
Right.
on if it was a legal wall to begin with.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, all in favor of the motion on the table, which is to grant the certificate of compliance, say aye. All opposed?
Aye.
No. She heard
I'm
like
not
3
voting,
votes.
and Mike isn't voting. And I didn't hear any ayes,
There are no ayes.
so
It's all
they were
nays.
all noes.
And
Okay, well, I do want to.
abstentions?
Oh, and
Or an abstention.
any abstention?
Tom's abstaining.
Okay,
So I do want the board to know that it is the applicant's right to request a hearing. Your decision is tentative, just like any others, and hopefully I'll be hearing from them and we can get them on a hearing agenda on May 9th. It should have been on, it was an administrative error. Okay?
okay.
The next under other business, I'm still trying to schedule a site visit for Webner. She spelt it wrong. But for Webner, I did hear from her this morning. Webner staff is available after 2:30 on Tuesday, April 24th. This again is to look at the locations for the coastal bank. They are concerned with the requirement of a full-fledged surveyed site plan. I told them the board was not going to be able to make a decision at that time whether the site plan would be required or not. I think they do just want to give you Excuse me, ow.
All
I
right.
can't do that either. A comfort level of where their platform, overlook platforms would like to be placed on the property. I know Mike, Tom, Arthur, Ed, you all expressed a willingness to go out to the site. Some of you expressed they just didn't think it was necessary. So how many are available? I can only meet out there until 4:30, actually 4:15 at the absolute
This is the
latest.
24th?
This is April 24th, next Tuesday.
We're saying start at 3?
You want to do 3 o'clock? Would that work?
3 o'clock,
for
an
everyone?
hour's enough. I mean, I've been out there, all you have to do is walk from here to here.
Right, could you email a reminder for us?
I would be happy to, because I do need to set a public, if I have a quorum of you, and I just would feel comfortable covering our bases and actually posting a public meeting,
Yeah,
just to cover it in case we do have a quorum out there.
Right.
You are looking at a site, it needs to be done to comply
Could
with
you,
open meeting law.
I'd like to say something about this. I think this is going, we're overreaching on something that everybody else has to go through a certain system. And they, and this has already been brought to us on this little thumb scale sketch, and, which was ridiculous and not staked, and we've already been out there. Now we're going to go again to give them a comfort level, and then we're still going to have to go again once they put, I imagine there's going to have to be engineered drawings.
They are going to file a notice of intent.
Yeah,
There
so we're
are.
going to,
No, I absolutely.
3 times.
Ed, you have to
Okay, I'm
understand
just.
that. No, I understand that.
I'm putting
but
my point out there.
You really do need to understand the position that I'm in right now, and I can explain that to you. Okay, so, I said that I would approach the board and see who was willing to go out for a site visit. That is what I am doing.
So some people want to go, Ted.
I've already been.
So have I.
No, you don't
So
have
you
to
But I
don't
don't
have
know
to
where
go.
they were, because they didn't bother staking them.
You don't have to go.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, it's sort of
Oh,
like
no.
appeasing a loose,
No, I understand your concern
Idea. I think
and your,
everybody else has to
your
be pretty-
position.
okay.
So my understanding is that there's a site visit scheduled for 3 o'clock Tuesday, April 24th.
But is anything going to be staked when we go out there?
I don't believe so. She just wants to show you where she wants to put the platforms.
Well, I'm not even, I'll go when we see.
I will have her,
That's,
the thing is, this board's not making any decisions out there. I've
No.
already told them that. The board cannot tell them, no, you don't need a site plan. The board cannot say, yes, this is, you're going out there so that they have an ability to explain a future project to you that they want to get
I'll do it
started.
for Webner.
So,
That's what they're hoping for.
okay, and as far as, or I'll schedule the site meeting for Tuesday, 3 o'clock, April 24th. Whoever would like to attend, please let me know. We'll meet in the parking lot of Webner. Vote order of conditions. Is there any order of conditions that this board feels you need some deliberation on?
Yes.
I will tell you, Foster Road, I do need to contact Tara and talk to her about that, especially with work on town property and removing the pilings. I need to get some clarification from her on that, and whether or not the town was notified when those pilings were removed.
I think there has to be discussion on a few of these, but I don't
Yes.
think they necessarily have to be tonight. I think we can do them the night we vote.
That's fine, we can do that. They were all closed last week,
Well,
so.
I think the only issue with Foster Road is, do they have the right to remove the pilings on town property?
that's a
And
very
that-
important
well, and-
issue. I think I know the answer.
I think that is something I'm going to discuss
Okay.
with her, and you may see this reopened.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
I would love to have a, do you have something to say?
Nope.
Would you like to make a motion to adjourn?
No, wait a minute. I just want to ask, do we want to discuss breakaway panels tonight?
No.
Okay?
I'm thinking the grunt by the end of the table is a no.
Yes.
That was
I'm
just
tired,
one no.
too.
We're back to you. You're gonna
Wore
make
me
a
out
motion
with
to adjourn.
Webner.
Yeah.
Can we have a motion to
Wasted
adjourn?
valuable
I make a
time.
motion to adjourn.
Can I have a second on that motion?
You got a second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Not
Unanimous.
sign any of the notices, sign that municipal.
He is sometimes. times, but he wasn't tonight.
I'm tired of giving